I'd like to call to order the June 12th meeting of the Clive City Council. Would the clerk please call a roll?
Mayor Edwards.
Here.
Council members Weaver. Here. McCoy. Here. Jenkins.
Here.
Line.
Here.
Locke.
Here.
Thank you.
Would you all please rise and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'm not aware of any changes to the agenda.
Move approval.
Second.
Motion and second to approve the agenda. Further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The agenda is approved. Next is our citizen presentation. This is the opportunity for anyone to address the council on an item that is not on the agenda. If we have anyone in the council chambers who wishes to speak to the council, please come forward to the podium. In the meantime, Pete, did we have anyone online?
Yeah, Your Honor.
Very good. We'll move on to our presentations with Liz, who's going to introduce us to Madison.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm very excited and thrilled to introduce you to Madison Worth. She has 7 years of experience in not only administration, but legal background. She's worked for 2 different law firms, one that supported the city of Adel. So she has some municipal background as well. And so I just wanted to welcome Madison this evening.
Hello. I'm really excited to be here. I get more and more excited the more I learn. So thank you all for this opportunity.
I think we met this party animal on Friday, didn't we?
She was there, yeah.
Oh,
She was
yeah.
Was that Friday?
Welcome.
there. Pretty welcome.
Well, and I will say, when I saw your name on the agenda, I know that name. At Wasker, I've done lots and lots of closings at Wasker. and I've
Oh,
gotten-
yeah.
I went back and checked, I've got tons of emails from you.
Yeah, there's a lot of those out there, a lot.
Welcome aboard.
Madison has been shadowing with Paul prior to her retirement to get up to speed. So
Very good.
Good, thank you.
Thank you. Next up, Pete, we've got a discussion on watershed. We have John Swanson here with.
Thank you, Your Honor. So tonight, we're very happy to have John Swanson here to update the council on work that's been going on for a good better part of a year now to come up with appropriate metrics and goals for the Water Resources Master Plan for the Walnut Creek watershed. Of course, Councilman Judkins plays a leadership role on that group as found as part of this drafting process. So tonight, John will run through some of the proposed priorities are, answer any questions that you may have. And then as we continue with the process this summer, there will be other actions that come back to the council for consideration.
Pete.
Awesome. Thank you, Pete. As Pete throws up a couple slides, because it's always nice to talk with pictures and not just listen to me talk. But again, my name is John Swanson. I work for Polk County Public Works. I do serve as the watershed coordinator for the Walnut Creek Watershed Management Authority. I have for quite a few years, part of a growing team to help really fulfill the goals of improving water quality and reducing flooding in Walnut Creek, which for any of you and many of you that have been around Walnut Creek for a long time with the state of Clive, you know that is no simple task. And as a watershed management authority, it was one of the first ones formed in the state of Iowa all the way back in 2013. Had a watershed management plan that really set the stage for what are we going to do. And then moving forward, we have all these cities coming together. We meet quarterly. My team serves as the coordinators, and at the end of the day, we're trying to make improvements. And I will tell you, as a watershed board, this is one of several that we work with. They're all different. And you all can probably appreciate you're probably on lots of boards. You go to a board and you probably have other day jobs and you go to that meeting and then you leave and you go back to your job and there's lots of things happening and but how do you turn these boards into action? And that's always the question that my team's trying to answer. And so as we were really had been over a decade since that watershed plan had been developed, all these communities still all attending these meetings. And we were really sitting down and basically asking many of these same questions is, what do we want to do the next couple of years? And that's where this idea of it's time that we revisit the watershed. We revisit where we all are as communities. And let's, we'll be the first watershed in the state to really look at doing some updates to our watershed plan. So we went through a competitive consultant hiring process and ended up hiring McClure Engineering to help us write what we were calling a 5-year implementation plan. And its simplest form it was, let's take a step back. Let's all talk amongst each other and say, what do we want to do the next 5 years? What do we want to do as a watershed? And maybe what do we want to do as individual communities? And how can we better understand roles? How can we really define the purpose of this organization moving forward, knowing that we've been working together for 10 years? And so we went through that classic process of sit down. We had booths at our watershed festival. We had all the stakeholders, new and old, coming together. And some of the things that came together, some of the input that we heard was really clearly defining roles. We really acknowledge that there's been a lot of change in 10 years. 10 years ago, many communities did not have stormwater staff. Many communities, like water was really a new thing to them. I'd say Clive was on the cutting edge. Water's not new to you all. And 10 years ago, when my team really started joining, like communities needed a lot from us. Fast forward to today, many communities have a great handle on what's happening within their boundaries. And many of them were taking the things that we used to come in and help them do as coordinators, and they were running with it themselves, which is exactly what we wanted. But now we're back to like, what can we do as a bigger group? And common themes were education. A common theme was setting strategic goals that were manageable and realistic, and drawing from successful examples of what communities had done in the watershed. And how could we learn from each other? And again, as a person who does this stuff for a living, all I do is watershed work. There's a lot of merit to having a succinct goal. Like, this is our goal. This is a goal that we can all grade ourselves on, and knowing that we're not going to meet all of our goals. And if we have 20 goals, we're probably not going to accomplish any of them. So less does tend to be more the longer I do this and talk with all the communities of the metro. And so we went through that last 9 months or so. We went through that process, and to be quite to the point, we set 5 goals. And to be clear, these watersheds where cities oftentimes know what they're doing, the counties know what they're doing. We wanted to define goals, but we did not want to be prescriptive. We didn't feel like the watershed should come into Clive and tell Clive how you all should manage your water. In fact, every community is going to need to understand, how do you apply these goals to you yourselves. Goal number 1, quite simple, is we know there's some flooding issues in Walnut Creek, and inherently, the more we can do to hold water on the landscape, no matter where it is, we're going to benefit from it. Whether that's in the far upstream parts of the watershed in Dallas County, or whether that's at the bottom in Clive or Windsor Heights. Number 2 is we know that strong floodplains make for a stronger community and stronger watershed. We know that healthy floodplains make for better environment. We know that not allowing houses to be built in the floodplain is a good thing. Creating park spaces, as you all know better than I do, is a good thing. So we wanted to improve our floodplains. Number 3 was, we know there's some water quality concerns. Specifically, there's some E. coli issues that have been kind of plaguing us since the original watershed plan, and we've yet to really, on a large scale, pinpoint what is the issue and stop that. So we're like, we need to figure that out. Number 4 was creating the opportunity to keep working together as a group. And we'll touch a little bit more on that. And then the last one, goal 5, kind of wraps it all together, which is we need to be tracking where we're going. In some ways, it creates the opportunity to hold each other accountable. It creates the opportunity to learn from each other. If Urbandale is really knocking something out of the park, make sure we have the platform to hear about it. Or if Clive is struggling with something, or Clive sees an opportunity, how can we continue to collaborate and share those experiences? But again, these are some Clive examples. Actually, I threw on this picture. Some of these holding water, they could be building a stormwater wetland. It could be doing a stream restoration, but not just stabilizing the bank, but actually grading it so the stream could hold more water. Or it could be improving your soils in your front yard and giving people greener lawns that soak in water. These are all examples of things we could do. But again, the plan does not prescribe any community what you should do. It just says you should reach these goals. And to look at these goals, they are numeric in nature. So across the watershed, goal number 1, we have a goal across the watershed of holding 50 acre-foot of water and increasing the storage of 50 acre-foot of water annually. So to put that in layman's terms, imagine a foot of water over 50 acres. Each year, we want to increase the holding capacity of our watershed by that amount. And we then broke it down per community. So each community in the watershed has a specific goal. Clive's being, you guys make up about 15% of the urban area. So we had an urban goal and an upstream ag goal. So your 3.75 acres feet is 15% of the urban area. And so each community now has their own goal. And now inherently, if we all reached our goals and in 5 years we held back 250 acre foot, that's a lot of water. That's real improvement for 5 years. Similarly, in floodplains, an acre goal, you guys do have one of the larger goals because it's not shocking to you all. You have a lot of floodplain. But coming in, restoring, protecting, and improving floodplains We then have an E. coli monitoring plan that we're going to be implementing starting this summer to really pin down and target the location of E. coli sources. And then we're going to work together on our regional approach, which is continue to host a watershed festival that travels around the watershed. We're going to have a funding workshop every October where there was lots of interest in collaborative funding projects together. But there's a huge diversity of what that can mean. So we're like, well, let's get started. Let's, if people have project opportunities every October WMA meeting, we're going to create the opportunity for communities to share those opportunities. And then every quarter, now, those of you that attend our WMA meetings, like Susan, when she's leading the meeting, we're going to start the meeting every quarter with our progress report and a tracking spreadsheet that every community is going to enter in. And we're going to be working on basically how are we incrementally working towards these goals, noting we have the rest of the year to basically set the stage for this. Starts year one is January 1st of next year. And to wrap up my spiel, I'll add that each community, like really what's happening between now and December 31st, we expect this plan to be approved by the WMA at our July meeting. And then each community going back and really developing their own community specific strategy. So then taking the rest of the year and Clive's WMA representative will be coming and saying, this is Clive's plan to reach our goal. Urbandale will be saying, this is Urbandale's plan. And the watershed coordinators will be tackling the upstream ag portions of the watershed. And we'll be basically tackling what nobody else can because you all work within your jurisdictions. And we hope to kick off next year with very strategic. Everyone has their strategy. Everyone is clearly communicating. And we're going to, at the end of the year and 5 years from now, we're going to have 250 acre foot of water being held. We're going to have 350 acres of floodplains improved. We're going to have tackled our E. coli issue. And we're going to continue to work together and have 5 watershed festivals and an annual touch base with every city council in the watershed. And that, a little bit of a spiel. I appreciate y'all's time. Do you have any questions for me?
Eric? Yeah, John, first of all, thanks a lot. That's really a comprehensive review of some of the metric-based steps that you folks are taking that really shows the SMART goals and what you're really looking for as far as results. A couple of quick questions with that. You know, with Clive, you understand where we stand is kind of the bottom of the funnel right there. How does the efforts with Walnut Creek Watershed coordinate with Dallas County and Dallas Center, some of those upstream communities where a lot of that water is coming in? How does your efforts focus on those individuals?
Absolutely. So I will tell you across central Iowa, my team's been learning a lot how to work with agricultural watersheds. And we've found that there's different skills are needed and different techniques in different watersheds. And this plan is basically giving us a concerted reason to really hone into Walnut Creek because my team has a goal of doing 31 acre foot a year in upstream Dallas County, in the Dallas County portion. So we will be doing some studies to identify project opportunities. We've been in ongoing talks with Dallas County, definitely interested in like their new Dallas County Conservation Board leadership and their new staff there. But to be honest, it's also one of the most difficult sub-watersheds to deal with in all of Central Iowa because of the significant development pressures. And what we've run into over the years is this idea of many landowners are in this transitioning period. And so the thought of doing traditional agricultural projects when they're like, well, my land's going to be changing in not long from now. And so we also have a subgroup that we're with the Soil and Water Conservation District that's actually going to be targeting 10 landowners that are in that transitioning area and doing some basic one-on-one interviews with them and basically figuring out what's the best thing that we could do that would work in the short term when it's ag and then transition well into an urban landscape. But it's a very unique issue in the upstream Walnut Creek watershed.
Thanks. Second quick follow-up question. How do you guys work with ICON as far as coordinated efforts, and how about the projects that can be affected here in Clive?
Yeah, so ICON, we see an opportunity to integrate like water trails into many of our projects. It's mutually beneficial. And also with water monitoring. So some of our cohorts at Polk County Conservation very engaged and partnering with ICON and some water monitoring programs. We haven't done in Walnut Creek yet, but we also are building several stream restoration programs in other watersheds like 4 Mile Creek and specifically partnering with ICON to integrate water trails accesses. But the thing about the cohorts of ICON at Great Outdoors Foundation, very exciting work coming out of there that they've actually co-launched their Conservation Acceleration Fund with our wetlands program. And they've been fundraising to the tune of last year. They provided $2 million for our wetlands program. So we do plan on taking those tools to upstream Walnut because wetlands are the one tool that can kind of do everything for us. And we hope to tie that all together in the upstream parts of the watershed.
Thank you.
Yes. Good questions.
Susan?
I'd just really like to thank you for being here, John, and to thank the council for your interest in this. I really appreciate it, that it was encouraged to have this presentation. Hopefully you've heard the emphasis on not being prescriptive, but there are real goals there, and it is an opportunity for Clyde to support this and to actually actively participate. Just to remind everyone, so he mentioned Walnut Creek being one of the earlier watershed management authorities established over 10 years ago. There are 29, I believe, in the state today, and each of them is made up of representation from the cities, the counties, and the soil and water conservation districts touched by that watershed. And for the Walnut Creek, the majority of our participants are staff, and we do have really good participation from Clyde staff. I do happen to be one of the elected officials and am serving in the lead role this year, but I really appreciate it that he often attends, and we have Ray and Doug, and really others do look to Clive for our stories and our successes. But I can't emphasize enough how valuable it's been to have John in his role. And please do convey our thanks to Polk County for helping to put you in a position to be such a great leader for all of us. And we do participate in contributing toward that, and the other participating entities do too, but it's just invaluable. So thank you.
Appreciate it, Susan. I would say we're doubling down with our series. We're actually adding 2 staff as we speak. And partially is because we see an additional workload to go out and do more stuff. And our board of supervisors have stepped in support of that. And we just finished our interviews today for 2 additional staff. And we're excited to hit the ground running and get even more watersheds projects done.
John, one quick follow-up. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Quick follow-up. How closely do you work with Dallas County, their board of supervisors, and their water conservation efforts?
I'm gonna be honest, it's been hit or miss over the last couple of years. So we saw a great step forward when Mark Hansen really got involved. Supervisor Hansen got involved in the North Raccoon watershed, and really saw them coming a long ways. But I think there's a history of a lot of conservation historically goes through the Natural Resources Conservation Service office. There's been a lot of turnover in recent years, which is when you're looking at rural Dallas County and working with people in Dallas County, it's been kind of an uphill battle to go over and build those relationships, fresh start. But the board of supervisors continue to be supportive when we interact with them. I would say they're not the most active member of the Watershed Management Authority, but whenever we do make it a point to try and come to their supervisors meeting every couple of years and touch base. But we've seen the last 10 years, good positive movement from them.
Perhaps increase the frequency to every year might be a benefit to you to build those relationships.
I would absolutely agree.
Good. So my question is maybe for Matt, I don't see Doug here. We have a specific goal for Clive, so 3.75. Is that achievable within our existing efforts? Are we going to need to add some additional projects in order to achieve that goal? How does that fit in what we're doing?
Yeah, I actually probably will have Pete speak over to this a little bit, because I know Pete and Ray and Doug have been talking about this, and some of the efforts we are doing, like our SQR program, speaks to that number. Of course, with our flood property buyout program in terms of restoring floodplain, that speaks to that floodplain number. But I don't know, Pete, if you want to add to this.
Yeah, a couple other things. Every year, our public works team is blocked out time in September to work on either improving or establishing new practices. This year, it was improving the pond that is just north of Little Walnut Creek as part of our bigger corridor restoration. But we also looked at what is programmed for Little Walnut Creek west of Alice's Road. There are a number of projects that we've already started to tee up that are going to help us make our way toward this goal. Our water resources engineer, Ray, they were very attentive to making sure we understood what's going to count, what are we going to measure, and we feel confident at this point that going into the first year, we're going to have plenty of opportunities to meet our goals. That said, if it changes, if it proves that this is not the right number, and credit to John for really being a strong voice on this point, We need stuff that's really actionable, not unattainable and just punitive. So if we need to adjust numbers based on what our bandwidth is, based on things that happen in the watershed that we are anticipating, we can do that. But right now, we feel pretty confident. Thank you.
Thanks for coming tonight. I've had an opportunity to work with you almost for almost a decade, but in various roles, right? So I've been happy to see you in your, well, not new roles, but been in a while. And look forward to working with you more both in the city and other places. Can you expand a little bit on the E. coli monitoring and what you plan to do? You know, yes, I am interested all over the watershed, but you know, kind of what you're going to focus on in Walnut Creek and how we're going to shop to that. It is a big issue.
It's complicated and it's difficult. And it's something we've been talking about for quite a few years with some local experts. So we have Claire Ruby, who is truly an E. coli expert as a professor at Drake University. We also have Jason Palmer with the Iowa DNR, who oversees the beach monitoring program with DNR. So two of the most experienced E. coli people in the state are living and working in Des Moines area. And so with our talks with them, what we are planning on doing is drawing from the water quality snapshot experience, where there's twice a year, Polk County Conservation arranges a snapshot where they simultaneously monitor tons of sites across the county. Now, our plan is during the most appropriate time of year, and we're still honing in when that should be, but tackling essentially every single bridge and access in the Walnut Creek watershed, every single tributary, which will take a group effort. So you'll expect your staff to be getting a call from me somewhere and say, hey, Clive, you guys have X spots, Urban Others X spots. We'll be bringing half a dozen staff to it, but taking one day to sample all those spots simultaneously, and then not only sample, but plan on taking those samples and sending it for a secondary analysis that says what type of E. coli is it. And what you can do is you can hone in by the changes between bridges, and you can essentially hone in locations. So you can see these changes between bridges, and you can hone in where are the sources. And then the second piece is not cheap, but incredibly vital, which is what type of E. coli is it? Is it human? If it's human, you can say, well, we may have a septic system issue. We may have a leaky sanitary. And then this mindset of, we got to search and we got to fix that issue. Or maybe it's cattle. We look, okay, there's cattle in the stream here. Well, now we got to get those cattle out of the stream. So at the end of the day, what I want to have by this time next year is our targets. We know there's an issue here and there's an issue here, and then go in and basically work with those experts to hone in where is that spot and then fix it.
There's another test. There's nothing that there's monitoring device yet.
And part of that is due to the lifespan of the E. coli. These things have to happen quickly. You have to get them refrigerated. You have to get them, you have like a timetable to get them to the lab and do the testing.
Good work. Thanks.
Very good. Real quick, Mayor, I want to congratulate Susan on your leadership with this. You've been involved in Walnut Creek for the system and the watershed for a long, long time. I really appreciate your leadership on this, Susan and John. So thanks so much.
Makes my job a lot easier to have people like Susan having your back and really managing a good meeting, and like the mindset of like, we're all here for a purpose. We're not just come to this meeting to just go to another board meeting. So it can be fun. It can be difficult.
Well, John, thank you for coming. I don't think we have any more questions.
Awesome. Appreciate it. Good questions, everybody.
Next up is consent.
Move approval. I'd like to pull number 6 off the board for discussion, please.
6. All right.
Second.
Motion is second to approve consent with the exception of item 6 to be discussed separately. Would the council please vote? And will the clerk please proceed? And consent. Consent is approved. Now, item 6.
Yeah, and just a couple of things, Richard. I see a couple of things. One is the change order for $32,774 to 98 cents to Keystone for work, especially on the special events building right there. And I understand things come up. That's not an issue. We've seen this, for a wide variety of projects for a long time. My concern is this is the third change order with this project. The first one being $9,600, the second one being over $14,500. And I'm concerned with how many of these change orders have come up and the trend that we're seeing with this. It makes me wonder if the current vendor didn't give us a very low bid with the old bait and switch where we're adding, change orders to make up for that. So this is the third change order at, $50,000+. How many more do you expect we're going to receive on this?
It's hard to judge for sure how many more we're going to see, but we feel like we've gotten through most of the issues on this, and I don't expect that we'll see a lot more on that. Total for the entire Greenbelt Landing project, we've expended about a third of the contract amount dollars for not just Keystone, but all of them. And at the same time, we've expended about a third of what we budgeted for change orders as well. So we feel like it's on track. Specifically on those items, a couple of them were related to, one was the original fireplace size that was designed as part of the project. The manufacturer discontinued it. And so they had to design a different size fireplace to put in there. The second one was related to some city requested changes with the hood of the oven and the cooktop stove in the special events building. We incurred those costs because the building code asked us to make some changes to that design that weren't part of the original design. So a couple of those are that. A couple other things are related to some of the just utilities. We've had a lot of struggles with utilities that weren't marked under the ground that have created some change orders as well. So yeah, it's frustrating, absolutely. But we feel like we're in a pretty good spot.
Good, thanks.
Well, remind me of the third one. You said the first two, and I have to read it again. The third one, this current change order was 32, and it's
I think 9 and 16 was I having that right in front of me.
9 and 14, and then this one also had the additional steel tubing related to stage. Right?
Yes.
That was asked for. One thing that we
asked for by,
or no, in terms of the design specifications, in terms of this Cattleman is the subcontractor, the steel manufacturer that's underneath Keystone.
Mhm.
And that's a big piece of this change order too, as well. One struggle we've had with the Greenbelt Landing project, where we've had some change orders here recently, is what Richard was speaking to, is we found when we were doing the parking lot that a number of the electrical lines were buried shallow where the original aquatic center was built. And we ran into almost all of them.
Yes.
And it resulted in some significant change orders. And I know I've shared this, I think, a couple of weekly updates. I know that's not necessarily related, that's related to a piece of the Keystones, but not this one. But I wanted to Councilmember Klein's point of why we've seen some change orders. That was probably the biggest set of change orders, was we had to further bury the electrical lines, realign some of the electrical lines for the parking lot. And so our feeling is, because we've unearthed some of those, we aren't anticipating as significant change orders going forward. But of course, we got surprised a little bit with the parking lot. We're not in areas where there's as much underground utilities going forward. We were in the creek work, but that definitely did add up for us. But we're fortunately well within our kind of anticipated budgeted change orders that we anticipate with the project.
So we're gonna have any liable.
It was like our parking lot light conduits, our fiber line. And it was the main power line that was put in. That was done by the contractor who built the aquatic center. Would have been Mid-American. It was from the transformer to the building. So that's us.
Well, a little bit, just a little nuance on that. So like when you mark out the utility lines, so we mark them out and so we know where they're all at. What we found out is so the main power line coming in from the street, Mid-Am's responsibility into the aquatic center pump building was buried, 4 feet or whatever the typical is. What we also found is that the city line that went from that over to the different building was actually put right on top of that. So it was marked, but the assumption is that was the deeper line. And so then when they went in that area, there was a line that was 12 inches on the ground and not 4 feet. So that was one of the big ones we had. It was marked, but we expected it to be a lot deeper because we thought it was the main power line, the way they had it marked with
Thanks for the background. We'll be watching this issue closely.
Absolutely. Thank you.
I just make one more comment on it though, for future change orders and such, is like this one, hearing the blip and reading the packet. It does concern me though, when there's a change of something that is in design, or change in something like tubes, or change in a fireplace that was designed and not checked on to see if it was still in production, right? I don't think that's on the own. And I typically would push back on that to say, the owner didn't take the fireplace, the owner didn't take the food, the owner didn't take these things. Somebody picked them and it wasn't us, so why are we paying, right? Push back a bit on whoever designed it or whoever drew it or whoever the architect or whoever picked those items. We've got to do a little bit, not on this, but more proactive or more reactive pushing and saying, I often say, one thing I know is it wasn't me that made the mistake, the owner, right? I didn't design it, I didn't draw it, I didn't build it. I commissioned it, I paid all the folks. Like in the case of the things that we asked for, 100% we should pay, right? But the mistakes in the way, if they're not ours, we should pay. And that's why we hire all these great people to design, build, and manage. So moving forward, I'd like a little bit more push on.
We have a motion to approve item
Approve.
6.
Second.
A second, approve item 6. Are we able to do that electronically? Further discussion? Seeing none, will the council please vote? And will the clerk please post that vote?
Yeah.
And that passes by a vote of 5-0. Next up, we have MPO. We have Dylan here and Jeff. So Jeff?
Mayor, Council, good evening. The MPO has been working on the preparation of the Safe Streets and Roads for All grant application, about $25 million grant application for the metro area. We have two parts of that, two projects in there. On the agenda tonight is approval of our resolution of support and supporting our commitment financially, along with the letters of support that are attached in your packets. Our first grant application is for Northwest 86th Street. It covers Northwest 86th Street from University all the way up to Interstate. It'll include some backplate, what do I want to say? Backplates around the traffic signals to make them stand out better. And then some pavement marking improvements along there to help with pedestrian movements. We're splitting that with Urbandale. They have about 2/3 of the project. If you look at the estimate, it's about a 65, 45 or 60, 40, somewhere in there. Anyway, we'll end up splitting it based on the actual percentages, but we've been asked to go ahead and, approve our half of it. So that's what's in there for you. 65, it's somewhere in that range. And then the other one is a safety audit on University. We'll be doing that with West Des Moines, and that will include looking at the corridor from Northwest 86, 22nd Street, all the way to 142nd Street, and identifying the potential improvements we have along there, things that we can do to make that a safer corridor for pedestrians, bicycles, and traffic. So that audit will take place. Those are the items on the menu tonight. We will then have Dylan come up. Dylan's going to talk to you quickly about the MPO and then update you a little bit on the SS4 grant itself. So, yes.
That reminds me to bring up a point just to talk about later, not tonight, but some of the safety stuff that goes along with that end park, right? And crossing 86th Street and the multiple different locations, what we can do to make that a little different. But again, goes along with safety audit, not expecting to add it to the project.
I think 86th Street itself, what's included in there, like I said, it's reflective backplates on all the traffic signals, and about every crossing in there gets some improvements with paint and stuff like that. Yes, so I think some of those will, not saying everything we could do. I don't think we have any RFBs in there or things like that at this time, but there's improvements at every intersection throughout that corridor right now. So
when we were working on the grant too with the MPO staff and the consultants helping them with it, we did talk about our 86th Street neighborhood plan and the mobility plan and improvements, and not just the 86th Street corridor, which we know is going to be the focus because that's the federal classification road and where the focus of the grant dollars for this particular grant need to be. But we talked a little bit about the parallel trail that we're looking to work, maybe that 82nd corridor down University. So we talked about some other opportunities going forward in the future. that could be around some of these sites, like the Lanand Park reconstruction, and connecting out to the 86th Street work. So our hope is to keep chipping away at the mobility improvements in the 86th Street neighborhood.
There was a whole grocery list of potential improvements in there, and we did nix the speed cameras and red light. Anyway, with that, I'll turn it over to Dylan.
up window sizes.
We can talk about that at the next meeting.
One thing I wanted to mention too is, as Dylan comes up and we get his presentation queued up, is council identified this as a priority in your strategic plan. I know the focus was particularly the university corridor, but we know that the 86th Street neighborhood plan is also a piece of that. And so we see this as a potential way to start implementing some of that work. There's still some things we can do internally that we'll keep looking at while we're waiting on the response to this. But again, just wanted to mention this is one of your high priorities that you identified.
All right. Well, good evening, everyone. Dylan Mullenix with the MPO. It's good to be back before you all and good to see you all again. And I've been going around and doing a presentation on just an update to the MPO to most of the council. So when you asked me to be here, I was like, in addition to talking about the Safe Streets for All, I'll just give a quick update if that works for you and kind of kill two birds with one stone. So with the MPO, what I'll talk about, just a brief background of what the MPO is. And I know a lot of you have been familiar with it, but I know we have some new folks too. So I want to make sure that everyone has kind of a level understanding of what's going on. Talk about some of the federal requirements and the funding that we work with, some additional member services, and then finally finish with some big projects. The Safe Streets for All is one of them to give an update on. Those four areas there match the four kind of pillars that we identified in our strategic planning effort that we did earlier this year. So that's why those four are there. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment too. I passed out to you hot off the presses. You're the first ones to see this outside of our office, our strategic or our annual report. So Matt, you'll get a copy of that in the mail too, along with our, dues assessment for you for the next fiscal year. But be on the lookout for that. And it's on the website too. So you can distribute it among some others if you would like. So just getting into some of the background of MPOs. MPOs are really forums for transportation planning in the metropolitan region. They're required in urban areas over 50,000 in population, and they're made up of cities, counties, transit authorities, state DOTs, US DOT, anybody that works with transportation, really. They've been around since the 1960s in one form or another, really formed when the interstate system was being developed because the feds didn't want to come in and tell us how to put the interstate through the region. They said the urban area collectively should work on that. So that's really the impetus behind it and have been around ever since. We are certified by the US DOT and we receive funding by the US DOT, both for allocation of funding to communities as well as the running, the operation of the MPO. We had our certification review in April. We have to be certified every 4 years. So now we will be certified for the next 4 years. That'll be on the, if you're curious to hear from Federal Highway, they'll be presenting that at our meeting here in a couple of weeks. There are 9 MPOs in the state. So again, urban areas over 50,000, there's 400 and some across the country. They all have different names. Ours is generic Metropolitan Planning Organization. Others are inside of COGS or regional planning commissions and so forth. Our planning or our MPO is made up of 20 voting members. A voting member are communities that are within that black boundary there, which basically includes all of Polk County and then the little bits of the urban area that spill into Dallas and Warren County. That are over 3,000 in population. A community can be a non-voting member if they are either in that boundary but below 3,000 or if they are outside that boundary, such as Indianola is a non-voting associate member. Voting members have access to funding. They have access to all the MPO services. Non-voting members just get a seat at the table with no vote or access to funding. This is a little busy, but it shows our organizational structure. A couple of things to note there. We have the 3 main committees up there at the top. We have our policy committee, which is basically the MPO board. Councilman Weaver's been your representative to that for a number of years. Mayor Edwards was until we reduced that down to one representative per community. And then we have a technical committee. The technical committee is Jeff May sits on that, has represented you for a number of years too. So it's public works directors, community development directors, and so forth. We have policy committees, probably the main one of which is our funding subcommittee. They're the ones that really lead the effort to hear all the presentations from our communities that are vying for funding. And I'll talk more about the funding here in a moment, but they really make the sausage, to make that happen. And Mayor Edwards is the chair of that committee and does a great job with that. And then on the bottom right, or sorry, on the bottom left, we have a bunch of advisory. and see ones about bicycle pedestrian issues, environment, freight, and so forth. These are really a form of public engagement for us that we want to hear from the people that are experts or stakeholders are very interested in those topic areas, because we know we don't know everything about it. Our elected officials don't know everything about it. So we want to hear from the people that work in those areas. And I say that to you because I know you get people from the public say, hey, what about this? What about that? This is a way to engage. So you can feel free to send them to us and we'll make sure they're plugged in. And if they feel passionate about something, we can put them to work on one of those roundtables. I mentioned our strategic plan a little bit earlier. So over the last couple of years, we've been doing a lot of strategic planning efforts. Last fall, we've been working on it for months prior to that, but we finalized two efforts. One looking at our governance. So we looked at that organizational chart. Does that make sense? Looked at our 2080. Does that still make sense? Compared ourselves to other MPOs to learn before. That didn't really change a whole lot, but it affirmed a lot of what we were doing was okay. There's a few slight tweaks in there to make sure that we have a board that is engaged in really leading the effort, and it's not staff leading it, or it's not kind of flying aimlessly, that making sure that we have that right collaboration. We also did something more internally, looking at, do we have the right staff people? Do we have the right number of staff people, right people in the right job descriptions and salary ranges and all of that sort of thing. So once those two things were done, we turned our attention to the strategic direction of the MPO. And that's what I talked about earlier. There's kind of those four main pillars. That was finished up earlier this spring. And then we looked and revised our mission and vision. And you can see those in that document I just handed out, and they're up there on the screen. The vision and mission didn't change a whole lot, but guiding principles is something new for us. And we really see that those are our guardrails for how we operate and how we engage with the community. So something that we felt important, that was important for the organization. Turning our attention to federal requirements really quick. If you look at the US Code of what MPOs are required to do, there's really only a handful of things, but they're pretty important. We have to have a long-range transportation plan that's approved once every 5 years. And we just approved ours back in November, so we're pretty recent on that. And that plan is important because anything that the community wants to do, anything the state DOT wants to do, that receives federal funding from the US DOT has to be included in that plan or justified by that plan. So if it's a specific corridor that we want to widen it from this to this or build a new road, it has to be specifically listed. If it's something like we want to repair bridges that are deficient, we just have to say, we'll repair the deficient bridges. We don't have to list every single one of them, but it has to be justified and fit with that scope. Once we award funding, that goes into our transportation improvement program. That's really similar to a city's CIP. It's just a list of all the projects that are going to happen over the next 4 years receiving federal funds. So we're going through that process right now. Your staff's been busy making sure that the projects are buttoned up and make sense so that when you go to expend funds, it's all kosher and the DOT will give you money back for the funding that you might receive through the MPO. We also have a work program, and that's really our scope of work for the year that we have to make sure everyone's aware of what we're doing with the federal funds we receive. And then we have to engage the public. So we have a plan that shows how we're going to and what we do with the input that we receive. I mentioned funding a couple of times. The MPO receives and allocates about $20 million worth of funding back to the communities each year. And that's funding that we get from the US DOT. We are just the mechanism by which it goes back out to the communities. The biggest program that we have is called the Surface Transportation Block Grant, or STBG program. It's a very flexible program with funding going to roads and bridges and transit and trails and kind of anything that's transportation related qualifies. About 18 of the $20 million we receive is through that program. And you can see there's a table there, and this is how the MPO has decided to allocate those funds. And it's not set in stone. We can deviate from that, but that's those are our guidelines for how those funds will be allocated. So you can see up to 30% can be used for capacity, but a minimum of 20% to bridges, minimum of 10% to transit, and so on and so forth there. So we do a pretty good job of sticking to that, but we want to make sure that we're covering all bases when it comes to transportation. A couple of other programs that are out there, one's called the Transportation Alternatives Program. This is really for trails or off-street bicycle facilities and so forth. That's $1.5 million annually. And then there's a new program called the Carbon Reduction Program, which is anything that can lower carbon emissions. That is also about $1.5 million a year. We don't know if that program will continue. That was something new under the infrastructure bill, though I will note that the Trump administration released their budget priorities and it kept that in there. So to be seen whether that continues or not. Showing here the funding that has been allocated for across the communities over the last 5 years, and I've highlighted Clive there, and you can also see how that compares to the assessments that you've paid into it. So it's a pretty good return on investment for Clive and the other communities. And I'd say the ones that have zero are they just haven't applied for any projects in that 5-year time period. They're mainly the smaller communities. If you're curious of what those are, I've got those listed on this screen. I will note your numbers are slightly inflated because we just did a swap of funding from Waukee to Clive. So it does count that as going to Clive. So your numbers are boosted just a little bit, but
We'll make Waukee.
yeah, but some good projects in there over the last several years. We don't want to just rely on the funding that we give to the communities as our only value that we provide. So we do provide value in other ways. We do collect regional data, or we subscribe to data as well. So two things that we subscribe to is Streetlight and City Data AI. These are things that the communities could do on their own, but we find it just more efficient that we do it, and then we make it available to all of you for no charge, just for being a member of the MPO. So that's something new that we've done over the last couple of years that seems to be successful. We also purchase trail counters and put those out all over the region. That, again, we provide that data to you, the Parks and Recs Department, and whoever can use that to see where's popular, where do we need to make investments in terms, because some are being used more than others. To complement that, we have a data bike program that you've probably heard of. We have an intern that just goes and rides all the trails every year. Maybe not every trail every year, but it's, we can put board members on that bike. We actually have a couple bikes now too, so we can be a little more efficient and rent that out to some other agencies if they want to. But this is good. It helps that you don't have to spend staff time going out there and inspecting everything. You can just pull up the visuals on a computer and then go investigate if you need to. The other thing with that is we are working with Iowa State University to develop a method to forecast that data too. We already do that with the roadway pavement data, but now we can do it with trail data too. So we plug in what you're spending on pavement condition rehab for both trails and roadways, and we can tell you, is that enough, or do you need to spend more or less, what have you, to keep whatever goal you have in mind.
Isn't that program kind of become somewhat of a model for other?
Yeah, it has actually. Marcus Kanan of our staff was in Seattle earlier this week to accept an award for it. And a lot of other MPOs and similar organizations from throughout the country have adopted that now. So there's more than one data bike out in the world now, but we've been doing it for about 10 years and we're the first ones. A few other things we do, we do a lot of data analysis. And we collect a lot of data. We make that data available. We're happy to help in any way. So when it comes time to grants, if you need letters of support, you need data to justify anything, that's really where we come into play and can help with that. Finalizing or finishing up here with some projects. So we've talked about the Safe Streets and Roads project a little bit here. Something that is important to understand is and I probably spoke to you about this last time I was here, is we developed a plan for the region of basically what is our Vision Zero plan or our comprehensive safety action plan. And in that planning effort, the region set a goal to reduce and eventually eliminate crashes or serious injuries and fatalities from transportation crashes by the year 2045. So it's fairly aggressive, but that was a big discussion among the board, but they felt that was the right thing to do. So now what we're doing with that application that you've already talked about, that is really implementing the plan that we put in place. And you have to have the plan to qualify for the implementation dollars. So that was the whole thought behind this, is we want to get dollars in the community's hands to make these improvements. Jeff already talked about the projects you have going on there, but you can see kind of the full scope of what we're looking at. So some communities like you have specific projects identified, but then there's some region-wide efforts too. So Jeff mentioned the backplates. That might be something that we do across the metro. We'll do roadway safety audits across the metro too. And once those audits are completed, there might be other projects identified at that time that we then hopefully will have funding to go after, whether that's through the US DOT, through discretionary programs, or that could potentially be through the MPO's funding that I talked about too. So a lot to come from this. Hopefully these programs will continue for the next few years. That's something that's still a little unknown with the reauthorization bill coming underway. Just in terms of timeline, we'll have these grants submitted by June 25th. That's the deadline. And then might be 6 months or so before we know whether we got the funding, but we'll definitely be in contact with the communities as we go through this process. Final thing I'll put a plug in for is we have a project we're starting to launch now is our active transportation plan. This will be a plan that basically looks at everything, walking, biking, so at trails, sidewalks, on-street bike facilities, all of that sort of stuff, and figuring out what does our region need, where do we have make improvements? How do we make it safer? All of that. So you can see there's a link there and there's a QR code that's being covered up by that, but you'll see it in your packet. You can go on there and feel free to distribute this to the public, however you want to do it. So we can start getting feedback and understand what the needs are and hopefully make it a plan that works for everybody. So I went through that. Hopefully that didn't take too long, but I'm happy to take any questions, and whether on the MPO in general or on the Safe Streets for All application that we're asking you to support tonight.
Eric? Dylan, thanks again for the presentation. We appreciate everything that you and all your folks at MPO do, and it is a good ROI for the city of Clive. Kind of an off the topic, but a question that does do with transportation. In your experience, what has worked better for the movement of transportation? Roundabouts or stoplights?
Ooh, they both have their place. I'll say that.
There we go.
You should have a roundabout. You should have a roundabout.
Specifically on Alice's Road.
Specifically on
What would
Alice's.
be your recommendation?
I'd have to know more about where specifically, but roundabouts, I know some people hate them, but they are very effective in the right context. So,
I was on the cover page of your plan.
Yeah.
As a roundabout. For
Yeah.
the record.
I did notice that.
Okay.
yeah, in the Safe Streets for All plan that we put together, there's basically a menu of options. We didn't want to, kind of like John was talking about earlier, we don't want to tell you what to do, but we did provide a menu of options. So if roundabouts work, feel free to do it. If you don't like them, you don't have to. No.
Can you do half and half and Waukee have
Ooh.
no roundabout and we have a roundabout?
That'd be interesting. Yeah.
All right, moving along. Thank you very much, Dylan.
Thank
for
you.
being here. We
Thanks,
appreciate
Dylan.
it. We do have 2 action items to consider with this.
Move approval for approved support for MPO's application to support transfer safe streets and roads for all.
Second.
Item A. Further discussion? Seeing none, with council, please vote. And will the clerk please post that vote? And that passes by a vote of 5-0. Then we have item B.
Move the resolution approve support for the MPO's application to Department of Transportation Safe Streets and Roads for all S4 grant.
Second.
Motion is second on item B. Further discussion? Seeing none, would the council please vote? And will the clerk please post that? And that passes by a vote of 5-0. Thanks again, Dylan. Next up, we have the code revision. Christine.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Council. Following up the discussion at the end of the last council meeting, we had a chance to conduct very light and has provided for you the recommended amendments needed to the city's code in order to comply with the state's preemption of prohibition of fireworks use. And I am pleased to report that that research revealed the city may, in fact, have some limitations which are outlined in the state code of 727.2 subsection 4, which are the time limitations, the consent of use limitation, and including the ability for the city to control, I guess, consent on their own public parks or city streets. So unless you have other further questions, this is presented to you for the first reading. And I want to say thank you to Olivia Cato, who is in the audience today, for her hard work and proposed revisions for your consideration. Not only are we revising one particular section, but throughout the entire code to make it uniform and to adhere to state law. So putting your questions, Your Honor, this is the first reading. If the council would consider the second and third reading, maybe at the June 26th meeting, that if there are any comments, right, that you'd like to consider over the next 2 weeks, that's fine. And if you do your second and third reading on the June 26th meeting, you will still satisfy the July 1 requirements. And we will be all celebrating America, very loudly on the 3rd, 4th of July, the 31st of December. So are there any questions? Concerns?
I'll move that ordinance number 1163 having been considered by the council be voted on for the passage prior to its final adoption.
Motion is second on first reading. Further discussion? Seeing none, with council please vote. And will the clerk please post that?
Your Honor, as that vote comes in, I did want to have a moment for Pete to talk a little bit about public education messaging that we're going to be proposing. It's in line with what you all discussed at the end of the last meeting, and this will start with a series of messaging online, but as well as the newsletter that will be going out right before July 3rd. So Pete, if you wanted to share that with the council.
Just for the record, that did pass, but
Thank you, Your Honor.
So, okay. So this is still a draft document, so for the recording and also for everybody's consideration here, we need to make all kinds of changes to this, but council outlined some dates that are going to be very important to make sure we're in compliance by the time we get to the celebration of Independence Day. We actually have a little earlier deadline when it's going to come to our talking points, because we want this to be ready to go for the July newsletter, which would be arriving in mailboxes with utility bills right before the 3rd and 4th. So this is one of our primary ways of telling the right Clive story, given this law change. We start by emphasizing here that this was due to the fact that the legislature made this recent change. It was not action that was taken by this council, but this council does now need to make changes so that we comply. I want to credit our chief, Garcia, for really understanding a point I think that you made well in the last meeting too, Councilman McCoy, is that some people are going to do this, right? And so there's no worth really debating the merits of that. At this point now, let's just say, let's do it safely and let's do it in a respectful way. So that's why we ended up with sort of 3 big categories for our talking points. First one is you wanted us to protect public property. So don't light fireworks on public property. We specifically named the green belt and the city parks facilities. And we talk about this being a situation where you would, if you do this, receive a citation. Second, use fireworks safely and dispose of them in a bucket of water. We could have gone down a whole laundry list of things here that would make use of fireworks safe or less safe. But the key thing that we see that gives us the most concern is when people take a spent firework and then they'll just throw it in a garbage can. You'll remember a couple of years ago when that was done by the vendor that was selling right down the street. And we almost had an extremely dangerous situation. It was extremely dangerous when that shipping container, which was only about 1/8 full, this is solid steel, the heat and the pressure of all those fireworks going off actually busted out its edges. So kind of like a balloon. It's incredible how powerful these can be. And people need to know that if you want to avoid something like that, to either damage your property, someone else's property, hurt yourself, put those in a bucket of water, let them sit. Even if you haven't used one, put it in a bucket of water. Make sure it's not going to be start a dangerous situation. And then the last bucket is be respectful of your neighbors. Here's where we name all the dates and times. We do need to make a addition to this draft version of it to say that on July 3rd, you're only actually able to shoot between 9 and 10 as opposed to 9 to 11. So we'll get that addition. And then we ask folks to be respectful of those who are really disturbed by these types of celebrations, whether it's a person with PTSD, family with pets that are disturbed by the loud sounds. And that then leads to the final one, which is don't leave a mess. Be considerate of your neighbors, be considerate of your neighborhood. Don't take your celebration and make it somebody else's project the next day to have to deal with it.
Pete? Good.
So I saw where the city of Des Moines is actually going to be providing in this type of communication, providing information to the residents about what's the best way to capture and report on someone who's breaking these. Is that something we want to consider as, video that you provide to the police officer, whatever? I don't know what all they're putting out there, but I saw that and thought, oh, that's kind of interesting. That's something we want to communicate. See someone active on the Clark Greenbelt or at Campbell Park shooting off fireworks. What do you do?
Well, I think Chief Rayberg may have some thoughts on that as far as a non-officer trying to film someone and the repercussions of that.
I got that last year. He gave me his cell phone and just said, send them all their neighbors to him.
Oh, yeah, you can give them all my number. That's fine.
Thank you.
Yeah, Mayor Council, I mean, there's not really a good way to go about it. People are gonna shoot fireworks and we're gonna get complaints on them. They're gonna happen after hours when they're not supposed to be. The best thing that we can say is we want to educate the community so they know what the rules are. After hours, if they're going off, call us. We will investigate them as we would any other complaint. If they want to take video and provide that to us, they can certainly do that. The one thing that the community has to remember is the police department generally can't be a victim in some of these crimes. So noise ordinance violations, things like that, we have to have a victim. People don't necessarily want to be a victim and they want to be anonymous. So it's just hard to file charges in instances like this. If it's going on, call us and we'll investigate it and we'll act appropriately in each instance. So that would be the best advice I could give you.
You don't need anything specific from him other than his testimony?
Well, if the fireworks are going off, we will have to have a witness that would have to testify to the fact that, yes, they saw those going off. If it was a noise complaint, yes, they would have to testify to the fact that noise was bothering me and it was somehow affecting my quality of life. Most people don't want to do that. That's why it's so difficult to prosecute these types of crimes. But if they want to do that, we will list them as a victim and they will go to court when the person gets their ticket and they would have to testify. Yeah. I could give you a list of things people could do, but it's gonna be a long list. So I think it's easiest to just leave it at call us if it's going on and let us handle it case by case.
Well, just a quick follow-up on the suggestion about filming. I think what I've heard from other officers is that you have to be very discreet. You don't, I mean, if you get in someone's face and start filming them, there could be further repercussions there.
Well, and if somebody's in public and somebody else wants to film in public, they have that right to do that. I mean, yeah, a lot of times that does lead to altercations. So we would want to limit that as well. But if somebody feels strongly about it and they want to take video, they're certainly welcome to do that. And if they want to provide it to us and it aids in a prosecution, we will address that at the time.
Anything else for the chief? Chief? Pete, anything else from you on this?
We're happy to be working with our friends at the police and fire departments to come up with a lot of digital assets that we're going to deploy as we get into the week of the 4th. So watch for that on social media. We're also working on being prepared for some earned media opportunities all around those core points about don't do it on public property. Do it safely with a special attention to not disposing it of spent fireworks the wrong way and be respectful.
And as Councilmember Weaver noted, Des Moines has already passed theirs. I don't know if it's worthwhile looking and seeing if there's anything they're doing that we might copy.
Yeah, so what we've developed here is we took a look at our neighboring communities. That's actually where we first got to point in the right direction on public property, because that's how our friends in Urbandale and Waukee had been talking about this. So we wanted to make sure, especially with all of our immediate neighboring communities where neighborhoods get real close, that we were trying to be as consistent as possible with the messaging.
Very good.
And I know that Des Moines has an app. I think you're probably talking about it, but fairly mature app they've had for a while. You can go in and push the streetlights out, this potholes here, this violations here, this bike wreck road. Quite impressive, but I'm sure. Yeah, maybe that's the app they're using to say, because you can put a photo, load it, and say, this is what's wrong. And it goes real time to Public Works or whoever, but not sure what that would be.
We're very familiar with those types of tools. Good options out there to consider. One of the thresholds that I've been watching for is, do we generate enough casework and those types of requests to necessitate an expensive tool like that, or can we use existing tools to manage it effectively? Thus far, we're still taking mostly an email and web form approach on all that. And then we've got great customer service when people come visit in person or great phone call as well. And I think that's getting us where we need to be today, but we'll need to continue to observe.
Thank you, Pete. Anything else on fireworks or home rule? That was the point.
Just a couple days. Just a couple days.
Yeah, yeah. All right, moving right along. Ted, tell us about a new agreement for our city manager.
Sure, the personnel committee met, we reviewed, well, as we all know, we all did our ratings for Matt. We also were able to get Chicago to participate, which was really helpful and very nice of him to contribute. And so we got a full set of ratings for Matt. They all came in very, very high as normal. And then we also had Sarah Mel Wilson and her staff do their, at this time, or every other year review, as well, kind of a 360 review. That likewise came in very positively. There were some things for Matt to be aware of, primarily things that are like, you know, we have some challenges coming at us. And so he needs to be very cognizant and, you know, particularly focused on those, as well as things like, you know, with those challenges, we need to make sure he's not trying to take all of those responsibilities on himself, that we kind of don't facilitate that to the environment. So we went over all that with Matt and used the pay matrix, just like all of our other employees. We came out to a 4.6% increase this year. And as we all know, we now have a new 3-year term as opposed to the 2-year. And so part of that is also, I believe, we'll now have Sarah Wilson's team do their review once every 3 years now. To help minimize that cost. So yeah, hopefully everyone read the memo, but definitely recommend that be approved for a new 3-year term.
So are you moving that resolution?
I'll move that.
Second.
We motion a second on the resolution. Susan, or anyone else have comments? If
I think Ted did a great job of summarizing.
All right. Well, would the council please vote? And will the clerk please post that vote? That passes vote by a vote of 5-0. Matt, congratulations. You've got a job.
Thank you. Yeah, appreciate the opportunity. It means a lot, your support, and look forward to serving you for the next 3 years. And then hopefully.
Very good. Next, we have objection committee. So Christina, tell us about this.
Sure, Your Honor. Well, as the council knows, for the last few months, you have been working through the the filling of the vacancy from Councilmember Michelini's resignation. The applicable statute's 372.13. That statute has outlined processes for the council to make that appointment. You have done so, and we have Councilmember Hawker, who was appointed on May 22nd. Following her appointment, within the next 2 weeks, a special election petition was submitted and received by the clerk of the city, and he determined on its face it was valid. Following that, within 5 days later on Monday, right, this last Monday, June 9th, the city clerk received an objection to that petition for special election. The objection set out 2 bases for an objection or to the validity of that petition. The first one being misrepresentations or omissions of information. And the second objection basis was based on a timeline or a dates of the signatures that were on the petition, more of a legal challenge. After review of that objection and looking at the code, section 44.8 and 362.4 set out what we do next. Thank you. The city council must appoint or form an objection committee to review both the petition and the objection substantively. Okay, so the code says the objection committee is the mayor, sorry, Your Honor, the city clerk, and then a council member selected by ballot or selected by the council members. So tonight's action item before the council is the formation of that committee by identifying and selecting a council member to serve. And after that committee is formed, we will go forward to evaluate substantively both the petition and the objection that have been presented to the council, while at the same time minding the special election petition requirements. So we're kind of on a dual track. With that, the action before the council is to appoint a council member. I guess I would leave it to the council if you have any questions about that or the procedures. Not really anything substantively to decide today, except just to join your honor in the cloak in this next phase.
Thank you very much. Any questions for Christina?
I have one, just clarifying. After that committee is set, what is the time period that committee has to meet? Is there?
It's a great question.
It's a wonderful question, to which the answer is the statute is less than clear. The statute is clear, though, that there are no minimum or maximum requirements, I guess is the way I would answer the question. There is no time frame by dates or windows of, so many weeks. Instead, I would submit to you that the appropriate answer is based on due process and notice, right? Kind of the general principles of due process and notice are applicable. 44.8 doesn't have a timeline on when the committee must meet. Clearly, with the issues that are being presented, it's very factual intensive on the first issue, in my mind, right? The committee's going to have to hear, so to speak, evidence of what is being alleged, and I would anticipate the petitioners who submitted the petition might have to respond to that. I also did want to say thank you to Mary Grace Henderson, who did some of the research on some of these less than clear issues. So thank you to Mary Grace Henderson for that. But the answer to your question is there is no time.
Well,
Except
yes.
principles of due process and notice. I would use a reasonableness standard, I guess is what I would say.
And the parallel timeline
The
for
parallel
the
timeline.
election, which we have to be cognizant of.
That's fair, Your Honor. So that's on the objection committee, if that was your question. If your question is what other timelines are applicable, there are a number of timelines applicable with the election process. But again, setting the next step on that parallel track is to set a special election. The city council needs to set an election as soon as, at the earliest practicable time. Again, practicable is not a defined term in the statute. So when I have to go and look at Black's Law Dictionary to explain what that might mean, that gives us essentially our standard of reasonableness, what's practical, what's unpractical in the time, circumstances, logistics, and coordinating with the county, and coordinating with what's practical in your community. That's the charge on the dual track. That's the charge to council, is to set an election as at the earliest practicable time. That is not on the actions for tonight. So the timeline, I guess, after that point, there is additional timelines set forth in the statute as far as when the election will occur and what the commissioner does. But that would be the next step, Your Honor, and on the dual track, if we're looking at timeline. So on both situations, as far as the objection committee and special election, both have a as soon as practical timeline or a reasonable standing. The statute, it'd be nice if it set 4 days. Mary Grace tells me it does not say that. So we had to extrapolate. And for what it's worth, this is not a common situation and there's not many reported decisions on the issue. So those are our legal opinion for what it's worth.
I'd also like it noted that you should watch the Grammys. I think this year or something, you took your opportunity to thank your folks in the middle of your speech.
Yes.
Make sure you got it in the time frame.
Well, I kind of,
Thank you to my
that was
parents.
me
Thank you to
displaying
everybody.
liability for any of the wrong answers in the future.
Your Honor, too, from staff's perspective, what we would offer is we had some concerns to setting a date for a special election in the middle of an objection and the confusion that could create in the public if we were educating the community on here's an election date set. And also, I would say that we haven't got a firm answer from Polk County Election Office yet on what date you have to do it in partnership and coordination. They're wrestling with, they have an office move in the middle of what potentially could be the timeline. And so from staff's perspective, we had some concerns with setting a date when there was an outstanding objection, and we don't even have a firm date to give you yet from Polk County Election Office. So those were some factors that staff was weighing as we were talking to the council about this on that dual track question.
Right. Eric,
Matt, could you just review the cost of a special election in both Polk and Dallas County?
Our rough estimate is $20,000 for just the cost of the election.
And the special election is the cost of the city, as opposed to the general, right, which is.
Shared. The city does, even a general election, the city has a portion that we pay, but it's a much smaller number because it's with a number of other entities that are voting at the same time with the school district. The shared cost in the November ballot, it is a strictly city of Clyde cost, special election.
I'd make a motion to appoint Councilman Ted Weaver to the Objections Committee.
Second.
Councilmember Weaver, are you willing to accept the nomination?
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. I guess my question is, do I vote for this or could I abstain?
Councilmember Weaver, I don't see that it would be a conflict of interest for you to vote.
Thank you.
Further discussion?
It does require a majority by statute to appoint.
Simple.
Correct, a simple majority.
Hearing no further discussion, would the council please vote? And will the clerk please post that vote? And by a vote of 5-0, Ted Weaver is selected to serve on the Objection Committee. Congratulations.
Yeah.
So our next step, Your Honor, will be a formation meeting, so to speak, to set timelines and consideration. The objection committee should conduct the hearing, in my opinion, in a public forum. So there will be public notice of when the committee will hear about this objection in the petition. And we'll go forward from there.
And one thing too, I would offer from staff's perspective is we intend to be transparent with all those proceedings, making sure the objector and both petitioner are advised and coordinating that to make sure we have all parties present for those discussions, Your Honor.
And we'll have a virtual option as well, should that
Yeah.
be necessary.
That would be.
So I think we've looked at some tentative dates, so perhaps tomorrow, Matthew, you can reach out to the appropriate parties to see if that would work.
One other deadline to be aware of, it doesn't have to make its way into the newsletter, but with our drafting process out, we have put a placeholder in the mayor's column. We could put it in other places in the newsletter too. But that's one of our most effective tools for getting information out to the community in a timely way. If the schedule allows that there are dates that could be shared, it would be appropriate to be shared at that point because they are certain is what the objection committee has decided, and we can get those published.
I think that with the newsletter deadline on Monday,
Tuesday, yeah.
Tuesday, it might be a
Might
bit
be
of a
difficult.
challenge.
Yeah, so it'll go out after probably
Yeah.
likely the first
First of July.
meeting, right?
Yeah.
Michael?
That can still be posted on our website.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we'll use all of our electronic mediums to communicate.
And in the newsletter, we can indicate that the hearing
Because they asked about the special election petition last week, and we've also advised them about the objection. So we'll also have that opportunity as well.
All right, any further discussion on this item? I think that's all we had. Correspondence, you want to comment on the voluntary annexation?
Not really involve us.
Then we will skip from that and we'll move on to reports. Brianne, do you have anything this evening?
I'm meeting with Matt here, he likes to be honest about my second home. So I've been kind of getting up to speed on a variety of things. Made good headway here. Couple more still to go, but good for now.
Very good, thank you. Chad?
Okay, a couple things. Metro Waste, I was served on the review committee for our executive. Really hard to get a salary reduction, but I was unable to convince my colleagues We will be extending another 3-year contract for the executive director, and in all seriousness, he's doing a fantastic job there. So,
And you're also increasing his salary?
and I know I tried, but so yeah, so that's Metro Waste. So congratulations to Councilman McCoy for that. Icon, we had the board meeting recently, and one of the topics that was briefed to us was the outfitters that are going to be providing all the equipment, the kayaks, the paddles, all the stuff that goes with in water type of recreation. And they did a study, and they decided here initially to just keep that in-house. They come up with a pro forma. They claim it's fairly conservative and that it will be able to break even. But they've got a lot of programs planned as far as like youth experiences and even adult type of activities that they will be able to have. And then we'll have partnerships with various outside organizations like the YMCA, Boys Club, Girls Club, things of that nature. But they felt it was important to do that in-house initially because it helps to control the quality control and make sure that it's done properly. And so they feel like they'll be able to primarily use seasonal staff and then just have a kind of an executive director of that kind of group that will manage it. So the staffing will be fairly minimal on the front end until they kind of ramp it up. I think the long-term intent is to kind of do a proof of concept once we're able to have these types of recreational activities, have some success with them, and then sell off that piece of the business to an actual outfitter that would do that at some point down the line. But right now, getting them to really buy into it at this point is difficult because there's no proof of concept yet.
And is that for just that downtown area?
It's for all of it would be for all of the.
How did that go over with, I know Johnston's very aggressive and active in a good way of getting outfitters. I think they had 2 or 3 outfitters on their piece out there. It kind of runs along the interstate. I'm not sure it's that waterway.
Mhm.
They had 2 or 3 outfitters on that before private, and there was no concern on.
There's no discussion of that. That was not brought up. We have a Johnston rep, obviously, but it wasn't brought up. So I don't know the answer to that. I don't know how successful they've been.
Yeah, I didn't follow that. I was pretty impressed that they had outfitters that were doing that several years ago, maybe 3 years ago. It was the first time I heard about it.
And that's actually goes beyond just the outfitters, concessions,
Yeah.
things of all of that, everything that goes into that, making the experience, a good one. That's all I have, Mayor.
Thank you.
Mayor and I attended the Metro Advisory Council, where we discussed planning for the next year, committee reports, timelines on some things and schedules coming up for upcoming meetings on regional coordination.
Very good. I want to call everyone's attention to the new cityscape that you should have seen. Again, on the cover is the public safety center. Great picture. And I think the thing to emphasize is that it's a story about LOS, local option sales and service tax, and how that is being utilized to pay for this without any increase in tax. It's a great for our tax. I show the win-win story and illustrating the importance of that tool. And I don't want to steal Matt's thunder in talking about Central Iowa Waterworks. I attended and spoke at the press conference this afternoon. And again, this basic message we want to give is don't water your lawn. People will do that. We'll get through this crisis. So, and Matt, I think will have more to say about that. But, yes, Susan.
Well, Matt forwarded to
Can you move
everyone.
the microphone so that we can hear?
The microphone is primarily for the recording that we're making right now. We don't have sound amplification.
Okay, Matt forwarded to everyone an invitation from Bravo to attend a social at the Des Moines Arts Festival Friday afternoon. And it just reminds me, I'd mentioned to a few of you, but it's worth the full council hearing that I've shared before an idea that my hometown of Vinton has a trail that glows at night. Really interesting. And Shive Hattery did the work on that. I had asked Richard and Doug if there is a place near our Greenbelt landing where we might be putting some kind of a trail change in place where we could possibly consider that, because there's funding at the Community Foundation that was in honor of Bob Johnston, my former husband, that I'd like to see put toward that. I'd be willing to put some toward it. I know of some others who would too. And Ankeny has recently done a project like this and received Bravo funding for it. So it just to me kind of tied with the possibility of encouraging people to show up at the Bravo social, and that just might something, you know, it's not up to me. Obviously, it would be up to all of us, pending what staff might find and recommend. We'll have further discussion about it, but I just encourage attendance at that if you're available. That's what we're on.
Thank you, Susan. Michael?
What's the date on that?
June 27th. And I believe it's 2 to 5. I know it's the afternoon.
2 to 4, I think.
Okay.
2 weeks from tomorrow.
Michael?
Two things. One, the onus and opportunity, and be good to mention it, so I'll steal it, but Food Truck Friday last week was a great event, as usual, but the recognition for staff was great. The amount of staff there was very impressive. The event always is well done, but enjoyed the amount of staff. The event was always good. It's hard to get everybody's schedule, that many people put together. So thank you for that. The other thing I'd like, and then I don't know if we can do this because I just dropped it on Pete, but I always talk about Lanham Park and the Friday and Saturday nights. So I've asked Pete to put up just a quick, and it may or may not, there's a photo, or this is a video. I'm not sure it'll play, but yeah, a little bit. Don't worry about the person filming. It's not him jittery. Maybe it's our connection, but I think the point of it is, and there's a still photo as well, but this was from last Friday night. I've been going out there for the last several weeks, every Friday and Saturday night, just to kind of browse and see what's happening. Quite an event. I mean, there are 200 probably folks there throughout the park. The soccer pitches are filled. All the tents and the food, and it's very social, community family kind of thing. People walk to different tents, and different families are making different foods. And so just kind of going around talking to them about what's to come with the park, and getting that message out. But again, I've never brought those photos. I've always talked about it, but the place is packed. The playground's packed. The shelters packed. Extension cords are running everywhere. There's generators to run it all. So quite impressive. So they're all somewhat surprised a little bit still about it closing, but their message is getting there. Had a couple of folks with me walking around, helping to the translation piece, but we're getting that message out, and they're very excited. So that'll be fun to see that change. I guess I shouldn't say that. Whenever it's done.
Working on the groundbreaking right now.
Yeah, very cool. So thank you.
Anything else, Michael?
That's it.
Anything further legal?
Your Honor, a few things before we dive into the Central Waterworks. I did want to have legal counsel speak a little bit to, council's aware of some concerns we've had with the rental property on 80th Place, for a number of years. Some of those issues have come to a head here recently. And, the city is, using, all the options at our disposal to enforce, rental code, violations that we're seeing. We're also having, having some criminal activity that has had to be addressed here recently, but I'll let legal counsel at a high level kind of probably stole their thunder already, but in terms of what we're pursuing, but there's a number of avenues, but one big one in particular.
Sure. I guess I'll take 2 steps backwards. This property is not, with the recent activity, that's not the first time legal has been evaluating our options. We've been evaluating not only municipal infractions and alternative equitable relief. We've looked at criminal proceedings. We've looked at rental code and building code, community development sort of options. This particular property is a multi-tenant rental property. So
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
this is on 80th
I wouldn't-
Place.
I wouldn't say that. I would say that.
Wasn't gonna bring that part up.
I sold it for the sellers, so.
The address is 1847 Northwest 80th Place, and we have yet to receive, the community development folks have yet to receive any legitimate leases, but our understanding is the owner, which is now an LLC by the name of One Hoops LLC. The sole member of that LLC is Matthew Wennerstrom, W-E-N-N-E-R Strom, S-T-R-O-M. There was a transition of ownership back in the January timeframe, and we were working with the owners to get up to speed just in the community development inspections and audit requirements. So first and foremost, this isn't even an approved leasehold. It's not even an approved rental facility under your structure in the first place. They have not complied with any of the audit inspections or requirements for rental units. That's first and foremost, kind of in that category. So Ryan Meyer and the ComDev folks are all over that. Secondarily,
That's self-audit.
no, this is for initial approval to be authorized as a rental unit. And there are a number of issues there. And so that's in that. We are pursuing those remedies with the ComDev folks. Separately and apart, there are criminal and municipal infraction with our both civil and criminal remedies that are being pursued. I just will assure you that all legal options are on the table. All are being pursued. Some of this takes time to build the case, so to speak, for the remedy that we are going to seek from the court when the time comes. But we are on the cusp of implementing many of those actions. We have reached out multiple times to the owner. I too have even called twice to say this is, kind of from your last chance to get this resolved. But I will assure you that the code allows us to seek abatement, not only of the action, but also alternative relief. There's a very broad alternative relief authorized by the judge once we get in front of the court on this, and costs and personal judgment against those that are in violation. We are, generally speaking, we're over 8 violations, and for each violation per day of violation, it's $1,000. So this is a significant financial, kind of direction that we are going. We want to make sure we have the entire package, so to speak, put together for all 3 remedies that we're looking at. So I know that it is eyesore and difficult for the residents and the neighbors, but I will assure you with the police department and the community development, we are exploring every available remedy right now, and give us just a little bit more time to get that delivered for appropriate action.
When complaints are received, our staff does an active inspection audits. So only self-audit only applies if there hasn't been a complaint.
To the extent any of you know Matthew Wennerstrom or One Hoops LLC, this is not his only rental property. He has a few others. We would encourage him to, communicate with us, but this is not going to go. This is going down a very, I guess, deliberate and extraordinary path. That's an Israeli. So we will seek, we are pursuing all of those remedies. It's just not safe, right? At the bottom, at the end of the day, it's just not a safe residence, and certainly for the tenants, let alone. So, I mean, I guess your questions, I can't, we do have a couple other, ordinance updates that we will present to you in exploring this issue. You notice that we don't have a rent abatement remedy as a city. Some other cities do, where you essentially contact the tenant and say, you're not, there are violations of your rental unit. Instead of paying your landlord, you pay the city, or don't pay at all. So we are going to bring one of those remedies forward for you here in the future. But that's a good example where the city of Clyde's been very fortunate to have responsible landowners and landlords, and this is just one that's not meeting the requirements. So I'm happy to address personal or individual questions if anyone has any, but to those that are inquiring, they are frustrated, and we are and have been, putting together kind of that case and those remedies. That was a lot. You've been busy.
Yes.
Legal team. Thank you.
Further questions or comments for Christina? Just for the record, I spoke, it wouldn't hurt to remind folks that there was legislative action that restricted our abilities to do more.
That is true. We do not have an eviction remedy.
Your Honor, one more item before we get into the Central Iowa Waterworks in terms of how we're implementing the stage 3 restrictions, is I do want to recognize a number of our lifeguards as well as some bystanders for an incident that occurred last week Monday at our aquatic center in terms of a young child who needed to be rescued out of the pool, and a number of people stepped up on that effort, including our lifeguards. And we've been reviewing the incident that we do with every time something like this happens with the staff. The fire department's been doing a great job as they responded to the incident in terms of providing support to the lifeguards, in terms of reinforcing, what those trainings and practices are. Because this was the third day we've been operating for this season to have an event like that occur. But very proud of our team, and of course, the child is in a good place and safe, and so that is the best result that we're hoping for. And anytime that these things happen, there's always something we can learn from, and we'll definitely take that and the trainings going forward with that team over at the Aquatics that did a great job. So wanted to mention that. Lastly, Pete and I will tag team this one a little bit. So of course we've had a lot of discussions today, and we've got kind of a running slide deck that we've started to put together. The team has been meeting quite a bit already today and over the last few days in terms of the situation that we're in as a member of Central Iowa Waterworks and conservation and now enforcement strategy that goes along with the stage 3 restrictions, which again ban lawn watering in the entire city, all the cities that are connected to the Central Iowa Waterworks system. And wanted to make sure that we outline a little bit of the messaging that we're taking. We've already sent an email, and in fact, it came out during this council meeting to all of our utility customers that are set up in our Express Bill Pay or electronic bill pay system. We have sent a communication that is addressed to me in terms of what is occurring and what we're asking folks to do. We intend to kind of go through the list tomorrow morning. Every 24 hours, we can review a customer list of folks that are using their irrigation meters. And we'll be reviewing that list tomorrow morning and sending another specific communication. Pete's got the communication that we sent out on the screen. We'll be sending another layer, another level of communication specifically to those folks that have been actively using their irrigation meter in the last 24 hours. And have another message that we will send out to them with a little bit more pointed language. I'll be frank. That's the mode we feel that if we're doing some good communication up front, hopefully it doesn't come to any of the enforcement on the back end. That's the last thing that we want to do, but we're preparing as a staff to do it. And so we will talk through a little bit of that tonight. But what I want to start with is Pete's got some really good slides here on messaging that we're using. both in our public communications in line with what Central Iowa Water was sharing, and I want to run through that a little bit with the council, and then we'll focus a little bit more on the enforcement side to make sure you all are comfortable with the strategies we look to employ here basically this week. So, please want to touch on the messaging.
Thank you, Matt. So I want to start by saying for the recording, anybody who watches this later, this is as of right now. So this is very much a draft document, and there's a lot of living into this, learning as we go. That will be a part of the successful storytelling and ultimately getting successful compliance with this very important directive. The mayor said it before. We are on the cusp of breaking the standard for safe water when it comes to nitrates, and our best chance to prevent crossing that threshold is stop watering your grass. We doubled the amount of water we use during turf watering season compared to non-turf watering season. We need to dramatically drop usage now so we have capacity to actually start doing more of that treatment work. So that is the heart of our talking points. Based on messaging came from Central Iowa Water Works. We are staying very close to our partners there because it's critical that we have a unified message across all the members. We start by talking about what that exceedance level would be for the nitrates, and then emphasize too what is self-evident, that is essential needs like cooking and drinking is more important than watering grass. Period. Nothing more I don't think needs to be said about that. We just need to say it with conviction and get that word out to as many people as we possibly can. Next, we emphasize that it's because of the huge load that turf watering puts on our system that our best chance to free up capacity is to really attack the turf work. That doesn't mean it's forever. We can have some recovery, and we know that we have right now abundant water as long as we have the time and capacity to treat it for those important purposes. So again, stop watering grass.
Pete, that's example to both residential and commercial.
Yes, all turf. Now,
And the city.
in the city. Yep, and so we're going to get into that because it does quickly introduce a number of caveats, and a lot of your constituents have already started reaching out with questions that are about, what about my garden? What about my trees and so forth? And so we're going to give you some answers to that as we go through this deck quickly. We do want to be very firm because of the seriousness of the situation, that there will be consequences for people who don't follow this important directive. The city is going to be very active monitoring any water that's going through irrigation meters. We could do that on a daily basis, and we may be able to do it with more frequency than that. But that becomes a very good, easy way for us to accurately prove when somebody is using their irrigation system. And it could be that they have a lot going through because they're actually watering turf, but maybe it's a little because they have a leak, or maybe it's a little because there's some other setup with their plumbing where their spigot that's on the side of the house that would be used for something like not watering turf is wired through their irrigation. So those are the types of situations where we're going to need to work with the people we identify who have the gallons going through and determine then, is this truly a violation? But we're going to be very direct with all of that, because if it is anything that even smells like it, we've got a tool to quickly get information to them electronically to say stop, and then to do some prioritization after that of the people who maybe are using a lot and take an extra step with them. The last thing I want to emphasize on our talking points, you've heard me say it before, it's so important as you think of Clyde's voice, that we are sounding that note of optimism, even in hard times, that our future here together is a future that we should all be kind of excited about, even when it's tough. And I don't want to lose that as we go through this important storytelling. So that's that final bullet where we say, work together right now. We all have that sort of common commitment to the common good. We can get past this and we can get back to our normal summer, and people can get back to treating their property and their lawn in a way that they see fit, so long as it doesn't unnecessarily burden or threaten the safety of the water supply. So those are our core talking points right now. They could evolve. I can tell you right now, in the course of this meeting, I did just get another FAQ sheet from Central Iowa Water Works. And if we get a spike of some very common questions like, can I water my garden? It may be worth adding that to some of this core messaging that we've got right here, so that people can move forward a little bit of confidence, because they don't want to screw up. Most of these people that are community, they want to do what's right in this situation. And so if we can help them with those questions and alleviate some of that concern, we'll be doing a good job. Any questions about this?
I'm curious about two things. One is, where's the explanation of why nitrates are so high right now? You know, we've heard this is unprecedented, all that kind of thing. I just know people would like to have that explained. And then, you know, there is messaging out there about use of water by data centers and others. And while we're told that may not be as much as some people think, there are a lot of people thinking that that's a heavy use. So I think both of those need to be addressed at some level.
Yep, I'm going to get to that here at the end of this deck. So if it's okay with you, council member, I will.
So are we only halfway into the core messages? Because I think at least the why is core.
Well, I would articulate the why just a little bit differently right now. And that is this slide here. And I think we still need to get some clarification, but this is what makes the nitrate pollution a public health situation and why it's so important that we don't cross that threshold if we can avoid it. If there is a perception that for any part of the population that the drinking water sources are not safe, it has a very serious potential to become sort of a runaway story where people start feeling like, well, if it's not safe for the newborn, is it really that safe for me? And so,
In fact, the 10 is not something that most health officials even agree is.
that has come out, and in other parts of the developed world, there is a much lower standard for nitrates, but this is us citing what is being cited by Central Iowa Water Works. The standard they meet is what comes from the US EPA for drinking water, so we're sticking to that part of the storytelling at this time.
I think that's fine, but it's worth all of us knowing that most people do not agree, and there's a high correlation of certain cancers, especially thyroid cancer, of which I happen to be a thyroid cancer survivor, where it should be controlled under 5. And a lot of physicians in Des Moines are suggesting that that's why we need reverse osmosis systems in our homes, since we're controlling the 10. So I'm not saying that this is the place we have to argue that, but it is worth arguing. And it's one reason we need to talk about why or nitrates high.
So we can definitely add the I think 2 core points about why nitrates are high right now. The highest nitrate levels we're seeing in any of the source waters currently are in the Raccoon River and in the Des Moines River. They clear enormous areas of land where the dominant land use is agriculture. And in this time of year, when you don't have as robust a stand of crops, and you have application of artificials, fertilizers, and more pretty recent application of manure as part of the manure management plans that all of the barns are required to have in the state of Iowa, if you get the water flowing, the precipitation coming at the right time, you can end up with this very explosive type of situation where we see almost record levels of nitrate into some of the core source waters. It is not exclusively necessarily, though, that dominant land use of agricultural row crop production that leads to this. There is contributions also from urban land use applications. But if you were just looking at the total acres that are in those 2 watersheds and the land use that goes associated with each of those acres, then we do need to make sure it is reasonable to say very factually that this is in part a consequence of our choices around how we use land in the watershed and how we permit it to be used for different types of agricultural activity. Now, for a simple core message, we need people to immediately do one thing, and that's stop watering their turf, because we're not going to change those upstream land uses soon. We need to see behavior choices now that need to change. We need to focus on the turf. One question we still want to get some clarity on is cooking with water. Water that has high nitrate levels in it, if you boil it, it actually can concentrate those nitrate levels and more. It does not eliminate them. So we just want to make sure we're getting clarity on all of those core essential services and what we can and can't, what the water can and can't safely be used for those basic things. One other situation here that we learned about from the pandemic is we don't want to be put in a position where the city has to be presented as a public health expert. We aren't. That's why we have public health experts in Polk County Public Health. So if we get into more complex questions about really, is it 6-month-old versus a 12-month-old versus 18-month-old? That's when we're going to be giving our staff direction to direct folks to the public health experts on this so they can get additional trustworthy information. We've already started building out our event, or our sort of incident page on this, and I'll be building out more of it tomorrow with links to places where people can get that information, should they care to get that.
Pete, I think Susan's hang up is on bullet 2. Maybe
Maybe
we can.
say that that's also from the EPA instead of making a blanket statement that it's safe, because I mean, we do have reason to know that that's arguable. And so just citing the standard for it instead of our assurance that it's safe, I think I'd be more comfortable with.
I'm gonna need to then probably go through some rounds of iterating with the council if you'd like to see different versions of this, because this is consistent with Central Iowa Water Works at this time.
What they're sharing.
And on top of that, there is I think it's valuable to think about the long-term reputation of the quality of the water produced by Central Iowa Water Works. There will be you've heard Matt use this analogy a lot. Our currency of our work is trust. Similar with other service providers like Central Iowa Water Works. If there is a declining trust in their ability and our collective ability to deliver safe, clean drinking water, then it will take a long time for us to regain that, and it can present other challenges as well. So we want to be accurate and truthful, which I think these points are. But at the same time, we want to make sure that we are not creating undue confusion or creating uncertainty about the standard, because this is directly from the EPA.
Maybe just a
Just say that.
slight modification.
That's in
Number
the first
2
part.
would be water meeting these standards is safe. Just a slight modification might satisfy Susan.
So the standard is there in the first bullet about the EPA.
Right.
We'll just take out the bullet and have that be a continued thing.
So I think
So
she's
it's
saying that
tied
if
with
you
that.
put in based on US EPA, it is safe for other people to drink, it would satisfy what she's asking. It's just, I think she's saying it's not us saying it's safe, it's the EPA saying it's safe. Which to your point, Pete, gives it more credibility. Perhaps I say that, but, and then hesitate after the COVID, but with all that back and forth, but I'm just saying that based on the EP, bullet 2 can be just that, but based on US EPA, it's safe for other people to drink.
So
Does that change or does that still give you concern about the message of we have safe water? And you're right.
Yeah, I understand that.
So does
I just like it tied to the EPA instead of seeming like it's coming from us.
you see added the bold last sentence?
Yeah, I do.
that work?
Yes.
With addition.
Okay.
One thing that's interesting on this one too, and that's why the boiling point is a very important one, is that actually makes it worse. Nitrates.
Oh, wow.
So
Concentrates it.
concentrates the nitrates. The last thing you want to do is boil. Because a lot of times in boil orders for certain kinds of bacteria, it's the exact opposite of nitrates. Not, and that does not fix that.
So from a capacity standpoint, I help you understand why we have run out of capacity and directly tying that to watering grass. And because we have chewed up all of our capacity in our plants, that doesn't leave us with the space we need to be able to treat it fast enough to then blend it and keep us under that nitrate threshold. So this point here is emphasizing that we are choosing this strategy to hopefully alleviate this crisis because it was the fastest way to getting back to a safe level for the entire drinking water system. We also want to emphasize with folks that everybody has a chance to use their water wisely. These first 5 points are directly from Central Iowa Water Works with some common practices that are nice to do, but they don't have to be done right now. And so if you don't have to do them, or like you would otherwise, then that's another way to save water and use it wisely. These last bullets here, though, we're still working these out. So it's for the council's knowledge, Central Iowa Water Works is in a position to help sort of build the utility for all of the production and guide the process of building more capacity in the future, making sure it's operated correctly. But when it comes to the enforcement of a directive like this, they cannot go in and do the sort of the enforcement work or policing work within each member jurisdiction. That falls to us directly to decide how are we going to do this enforcement storytelling? How are we going to hold folks accountable? How are we going to get behaviors to change? And so for them, they can walk up to sort of the line to point where that sort of activity should go, but then they can't necessarily do it themselves. And what I felt in conversations today with the other communications professionals is that Central Iowa Water Works probably would not set up a central hub where people could report instances of, oh, I see sidewalk water here from something that looks like it's broken, or here's somebody who was watering, or here's a business that something else doesn't look right. I think that's going to fall to us. Now, the only entity prior to tonight that I'm aware of besides us that has set up a place where people can start to do that reporting is Des Moines Water Works. They're doing it simply with report@DesMoinesWaterworks.com and email. We're working on setting up a different tool. We'll have people ready to take the phone calls. We'll have people ready to monitor all the web forms we have on the website. But we also have stood up this tool very quickly, and it's still a bit in production. It is web-based and renders very nicely on a phone. So if people see it, something that doesn't look right, they can report it to us. It's as simple as zooming in on your map here, or setting a point. In this case, there we go. It's those two Cook boys right there. So you can set your point. You can come in and date it when you saw the water use violation, the time of the violation, and if you're on your phone, you can type in a quick description and add a picture. If you want to provide your name, you can, and then you hit submit. So I think most people are going to do the right thing. I think they're going to need a very, very direct reminder in some situations. But if we do have those who just say, I'm going to flaunt the rules, this is a way for us to, as a community, all show some accountability to one another. I don't expect we'll see tons of activity that's coming through this, but we did want it to be a way that people could submit the information. We'll take what we get from that form, which dumps out in a CSV file, and use that then in conjunction with the monitoring we'll do on the irrigation meters to then come up with a prioritized list of places where we need to communicate more or take additional enforcement actions as we get into this ongoing period of enforcement.
And you get to this from the website?
This is a standalone page that's powered by our GIS system. Corey Phillips, our GIS senior analyst, put this together very quickly this afternoon. And we'll link to it from our incident page. But we can also have, instead of having to go to the incident page, we can put this in social media and people can go directly to it. Or we can create a separate news story with just that link and people can go directly to it.
Like a QR code.
We got it. We have a QR code already too.
It was a very similar tool that we used back in Rachel, actually, to help with damage assessment, where folks could take a picture of a down tree or whatever. They were helping us as our staff was out doing damage assessments. It's actually
This could be done for fireworks too.
very similar tools. Yeah, very similar.
Yep. Okay, so I'll keep moving quickly because I know had
I'll
a,
ask you a quick question about that though. So if somebody were to leave their name as a reporter, is that public information?
Yes.
I think that should be stated there, let people know that they can choose to give it, but that will be available or requested.
yep, you can do that. These are good items to make. Okay. So we will update this as we bring all of our assets to bear and see what our other partners are going to be doing. If certainly Central Iowa Water Works decides to go a little bit further, we'll want to share their information too. And we're going to put all of these in the appropriate emergency management sites because they're creating sort of joint information hubs too, where people can provide links to go back to the individual jurisdictions. One very important point about using water wisely is that do not call 911 if you see this. This is not the type of thing that's appropriate for our police and firefighters to be addressing.
So the Cook boys have a slip and slide going.
Call their dad.
Call their dad. Right?
Yeah, call their dad. Dad will take care of that. Okay, so this is a place where we need very good direction from the council tonight. And I would again emphasize that their process may need to change as we see how behaviors are changing and we get more direction from Central Iowa Water Works. Our intent at this point is using the data that's reported through the form and using the irrigation meter data to create a sort of list of people who, as of tomorrow, because we are assuming, let me start again. We're assuming that with the publication of the restrictions on water, turf watering, and all of our work with press release and with social media, that is a notification of the entire community that this is in place. People have been notified. That could open the door to moving, if we had to do enforcement, directly into taking action to turn people's water off over a given period of time without having to notify them again. But in our current processes, we have a notification period that lasts about 48 hours after we've tagged the door, or 24 hours after we've tagged the door.
Yeah, so there's kind of an interesting dynamic here. So we have 20-day agreement that we're a party to that has a water storage plan that speaks to this 48-hour requirement. Of course, we have our own city code that speaks to water shut-offs. So we're, treating this, legal counsel and I are talking through some of these things too, as this is something we've never done before, is we're going on the side of, okay, we have an emergency situation here. We have a shall meet requirement as a water provider, as a member of Central Iowa Water Works. And so we're operating under the guise that every day we're going to be checking our irrigation meter usage and using that as a trigger that if we see usage continuing between certain days, so of course tomorrow would be the baseline to Saturday morning. If there's usage between those dates, then the restrictions have been in place for well into Friday. By that point, that would be a trigger for us to notice those property owners that we are seeing usage on irrigation meter, or we've gotten a visual report as well that are you to educate them you're in violation of this restriction on lawn watering. If you do not comply, that we will shut off the water.
Yeah, if it's an automated system and they're not physically present, what happens?
There's going to be a lot of those kinds of situations that we are going to have to case manage through. There's going to be some situations where they might not even know how to shut their system off. Again, part of that comes down to property owner responsibility of the systems on their property to be able to shut it off. There is also the option to, particularly with the way irrigation meters are typically plumbed in households, is you can shut it off right at the meter, irrigation meter, regardless of the system. And at a staff level, we wrestled with that in terms of we don't want to be touching anybody's private irrigation systems, but we're typically in the water meter business that we could advise homeowners on how to shut it off at the irrigation meter if they're having control issues or leak issues or things like that. We know that there's going to be a case management element to this. We're hopeful that that's limited because of the good messaging that's been put out there, but this is a backstop process that you'd have the notice. We see somebody irrigating within that 24-hour period, notice them, if they continue to do so, then we're going to move to the further enforcement mechanism, which could include shutting water.
So the next 3 days, and that is part of the 28E agreement with Central Iowa Water Works that moves directly to shut off. So the next 3 days could play out like this. Data collected tomorrow on usage that happened this evening and then tomorrow morning. Compile the list of the probable violators. Communicate with them electronically and as needed in person or by phone. Saturday morning, run the lists again and compare to see if there have been changes in behavior. If we see repeats, those will be tagged on Saturday. And then if there's still no change in behavior, shut-offs would start Sunday.
And my concern is the person that's not there doesn't get the notice.
On vacation.
They're on vacation. I mean, it's summer. People are gone.
Especially over the weekend, right?
This is a draft document here.
Yeah, and this is why we wanted to review it with you all. We're looking at our commitment on the 48-hour piece. If this is something that's something the council isn't comfortable with. You know, if we want to look at it to the next, working day versus over the weekend, we could wait on any shut-offs till Monday, for example. The challenge we have is going to be these next 3 days are going to be some of the most critical days. Now, what I would say is let us get maybe a scope of the challenge and we can check in with you. If I feel like the list is lengthy versus a short list, then, if the council's comfortable with that flexibility to your staff to kind of make that call, we can do that. Because we could be talking a small number. Hopefully, we're talking about a very small number. But I'll have a better read on that tomorrow morning. We run the morning report of who irrigated in the last 24 hours, which again, wasn't under this restriction. People could have irrigated this morning. That wasn't under the stage 3 restriction. But it'll give us a read on who's currently irrigating. And then if we send the additional layer of communication, that'll be a little more pointed to those folks. Again, not saying that they're invited, that we saw that you irrigated in the previous 24 hours. We want to reinforce and really make sure, and it'll probably result in phone calls as well, not just emails. If we don't have emails for every customer, not every customer is an express no pay. So that is going to be a task at the staff level, depending on how big that list is. We want to make sure we get into contact with those folks because maybe they are gone, right? And we can make notes on those kinds of things to our account. If we know that that's the case, and we can right size our response basically. But let's get a scope of the challenge. But what I would say is, I think we at least need to have this option in our toolbox to get to clients, and that's kind of our obligation also to the region.
Yeah, sense for how long and will stay in effect.
The talking points from Central Iowa Water Works at this point is it's really dependent on weather, and also typically later in June is when we see the nitrate levels drop. But there's no guarantees in that. I would have loved for one of these rain cells that just popped around us here this afternoon to drop right on the metro area. I don't think there's a time frame. We're hopeful it's not longer than a week or two, but there's no line of sight to that at this moment. But I will tell you that every day, Polk County Emergency Management set up a regular daily briefing for every day, including the weekends at noon, to check in on this where we're at.
So Des Moines Water Works has the same policy at this point. It's not just Central Iowa.
So Des Moines Water Works, member of Central Iowa Water Works, just like we all are. This shortage plan is based off of a very similar shortage plan we had. We were direct customers with Des Moines Water Works. There's some tweaking that was done to it. It's built out a little bit more. So anybody who's a member of Central Iowa Water Works, because our source waters are the main source waters are the rivers. Again, it's not a water quantity challenge, it's a water quality issue in terms of what we can treat and produce. Because our plant capacities and water capacities are much higher than these numbers that we're seeing right now, but it's how much we can get the nitrates out of that water. That nitrate removing facility is running at its max. And they're blending from so many other treatment. We're pulling from aquifer storage and recovery facilities at their maximum, which we typically aren't doing this time of year. That's usually what we're doing in the drought period. So one of the concerns I also have is when we get into the drought season later in the summer, we're now taxing our ASRs right now. So hopefully this will be short-lived and we can be recharging those ASRs.
What's that?
So aquifer storage and recovery, it's basically a big underground storage tank that we usually fill those in winter months and then put them in recovery mode where we're pulling the treated water out in summer when there's peak demand.
Usually we're not running those this early in the season. And we're running it because that water is ready to treat it over the winter, has low nitrates for blending purposes in the overall system. It's not a, lack of, capacity production issue, which we have more drought when the rivers are at lower levels. So some other challenges to think about. Hopefully we don't have that, but it could be later in the summer. We do have rain in the forecast starting Sunday night, off and on for multiple days next week. And hopefully we see that.
One other thing to note in our most recent level 2 experience. We want to see more data from Des Moines Waterworks and other producers that are in this CIWW. But it does not initially appear, based on what we discussed today, that there was a dramatic change in behavior when it came to turf watering when we were at level 2.
It actually went up from what we were hoping. Yeah. Well, we were fearful that might have been the case. So we really need to see, again, if we drop the lawn watering, which we've done in the past. I remember the last time, we never got to this level, but we went to stage 1, and it was 2021 or 2020. We dropped 30% usage in a day. And hopefully we see a similar or higher number because again, our usage is typically almost doubling in this time period with irrigation.
So if I'm a homeowner and I just bought a new construction house.
Facade is exempt.
Facade is exempt. So if it doesn't contain, they just lost their yard and it's not warranted by the builder.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that here in a second. So, because there are a lot of those types of caveat situations that we want to make sure we're giving accurate information about.
And we have a city example that we had 2 weeks ago at this place, and we're on that slide now in terms of what the city is doing. We just placed fresh sod at Greenbelt Landscapes right in front of the aquatic center that we've been here down. What I asked Richard and team to do is we're going to do some hand watering now that we're going to shut the irrigation system off. Because I'm not comfortable with that perception of people coming into aquatic centers here and see the irrigation system running. We're telling everybody to shut the irrigation system off. We're going to do what we can at minimum to try to keep that sod alive. But for our case, it's a little tougher. I'm just careful of the perception of that. We are shutting off all of our irrigation systems, including ball fields. We're going to see how we can survive over the next week, especially if we do see some rain. In terms of Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, our fields should be okay. But I think it's important for us to send the right signal to the rest of the community that we're shutting off all of our irrigation systems too. We need to. That's part of the compliance. But we're going to do. But to your point that is specifically noted in CIWW's FAQs that you've recently, placed branch of sod that you're allowed to water
To establish.
Yeah, not excessive. To establish. Yeah. Because we have got that question.
Yeah. There are a number of items here that are getting into some very specific practices. One to note, though, this does affect a lot of the other construction season activities. It's a water intensive type of practice that you can have when you're dealing with water main, for example, or other buried utilities. We've said, let's see how we're doing looking after a week. Let's not create a perception issue. I expect that we will be adding to this list, but as we add more communication strategies, things that we're doing, and also other practices that we're adopting to be good, wise water users, good conservation stewards.
And I do want to note that we are maintaining the aquatic center.
Yeah.
Operating. Those systems, and you're going to lose water to evaporation in the pool. Their recirculation system. We do have water we add to it. We feel at this time because the recirculation system, including the splash pad that's there, is a recirc system that runs actually through the leisure pool. That we are maintaining the aquatic center powers at this time. That is one question that I have with council. Comfortable with that until we get a better read on what we see in drops. Overall, we feel limited on irrigation, which we don't see a significant drop. We felt comfortable maintaining the operations back to at this time. Unless there's concerns that the council would have with that. We can always revisit it too if this situation extends for a significant time period.
Yeah, I would assume that the homeowners can get a pool to research pool, right?
Yeah, we're not saying that you have to drain the pool or.
But you could begin to top it off. The pool. It says no for the pool, but that.
This is no filling like from,
Okay.
yeah, it's like, don't go out and
Yeah.
put a kiddie pool up and fill it, or like a bigger one and fill it. Yeah, we would prefer you not do that at this time. Yeah. There's no prohibition on, maintaining this level, because we're doing the same thing.
So these next slides have to do with some more unique opportunities we have with key audiences that we think can help us drive the numbers in the direction we want to go. We've already talked about talking with folks who have an irrigation meter. We also then want to talk to people who have been actively using their irrigation meters. That's what we're going to be doing when we're tracking what's going through the irrigation meters. Then we've got some folks who manage either common spaces or big areas for folks like our property management companies and HOAs. We're already speaking with many of them because they'll handle the water bills for their association or a big client. But there's other steps that we think we can take. We know our partners at CIW are reaching out to some of those big players too, like your Hubbles, your NAPs, and your R&Rs. When we're talking about landscaping, irrigation, and yard service companies, these are a lot of the players that can potentially help with this. Helps customers like, how do you get your system turned on? Came and turned it on for you. Maybe you don't ever look at it again until the fall when you turn it off. How can we be incentivizing them to reach out proactively now to their members, to their clients, to their customers, to help them comply with this law? One early idea that we've got right now is our partners at A+, who've done the SQR program for the last few years. They also do irrigation. Would they be interested with a little help from the comms team at the city to do something to help people understand, here's how you manage your irrigation system, how you get this turned on? I think that'd be further down the list of to-dos when we're thinking about putting together communications assets. But I would hope that these private sector partners step up right now because they want to be good providers to their customers, but also they want to do some good common good for the entire community.
And we did preemptively yesterday when the stage 2 was announced as our staff reached out to the top 15 irrigators in our community, phone calls to make them aware of that. We reached most of them. So we'll hopefully, we haven't seen, we'll see the reads hopefully tomorrow and how we're doing on that, but most of our commercial properties that have more significant irrigation level. Although there was a single family in that top 15, I will say that.
So the big message for home builders and commercial real estate developers, if you're at a point where you're right on the cusp of doing sod or seeding, don't do it. If you did it before the prohibition went in place, then there's a way to accommodate so that you can not lose that investment potentially. But even if you have just put down sod at this point, we would ask folks to be very sensitive to overwatering, which is a practice you see very often when new sod's going down. So we'll communicate through some of their associations, some of those teams that we know are very active in Clyde.
And we know Central Iowa Waterworks reaching out directly to the Homeowners Association.
Yep.
And those bigger associations are local.
Yep. School districts, daycare centers, these are the folks who who could be working with very small children or families that have very small children that would be in these groups where maybe they're concerned about the safety of the water or they have those 6-month-old newborns or younger. And so we're not going to present ourselves as the public health experts on this one. It's possible that we could pull back on any work directly to this audience and leave that to the public health experts instead. But we have such a strong relationship with the West Des Moines Community Schools that we've already been talking with them because we're working on different projects that I think it's worthwhile just to make sure that we all have common situational awareness about how we're doing our storytelling. And then finally, we have an opportunity to work with some wonderful civic organizations. This is not a topic that probably is at the top of their strategic plan. Certainly not the type of thing that the chamber has out there as core to their mission. But it's one of those things that is so foundational to the common good that we would ask them to help amplify these messages throughout this period so we can get good compliance. We talked a little bit about this already, and we're going to continue to build this out. this is a very much a draft slide right now. We need to add more points to it. But one thing to be aware of, we are going to Matt's point, use some pretty direct language. Don't have time to sort of beat around the bush on this message. If it's time to stop turf watering, it's time to stop, and it's right now. Not tomorrow, not after the weekend, not when you've had your chance to kind of push the process up to that 48-hour period. Now, do it right now. So expect to see very pointed communications like that. Here we talk about some of the questions that we think are going to come up, like, I don't know how to shut off my irrigation. We covered this a little bit. We don't want to be touching people's private property, but if we get there and see the irrigation meter and it's plumbed in a way that we can just turn that off for them, there would still be a charge assigned to them for us to come out and do that work, but that would effectively shut off their irrigation meter, even if they can't handle the technology on their own. If they have leaks in their system, they're not trying to water their turf, but they're still getting water going through the meter, that's when we tell them to turn off your irrigation meter. Can I still irrigate my turf if water goes through my primary water meter, not my irrigation meter? So when we goes through the primary, but not the irrigation. The answer to that is absolutely not. My grass fields for athletics, I need to keep it soft and green. Everybody should know that different communities are taking different approaches on this. Waukee, for example, has got a big baseball tournament coming up. I think probably out of Triumph Park or one of the places that got facilities. And they're concerned about losing the conditions on the field and not being able to recover in time for some of these tournaments. We're not in a similar situation with having such big facilities in Clyde. And so our recommendation is to stay consistent with what the city is going to do with its own fields. No water. It's more important for us to take care of essentials for humans than it is to be playing softball out of pristine grass. Is council good with that position?
We do have a privately owned ball field facility.
Yep.
There'll be one that we'll be reaching out to, just to see what the plans are.
Yep. We talked about the stod and the caveats there when it comes to your garden, but you could also put, newly planted trees or stressed landscaping plants. The answer there is you can continue to water there, though we hope everybody would water enough, not to excess. The answer then about how you're set up with the spigots on the outside of your house, does it go through an irrigation meter or your traditional meter? That is very much plumbing specific to the house. So we'll need to do a little bit of casework with each property owner to help them identify what their situation is.
Varies. For example, for my house, the spigot actually runs through the irrigation meter. And it's not the same. Every home just depends on how it was plumbed, the irrigation meter was plumbed.
Yep.
So you can be watering your garden with your spigot, but it'll actually hang on your irrigation meter. So we'll see that. And so that's something that we're very mindful of.
Tammy's suggestion at the press conference today was not to water with a hose, water your flowers or garden.
Just watering.
Yep. That's another good, just best practice that we can mention as well. Now, these last slides are for more catching on the other things that we know are topics that are going to be coming up. Councilwoman, your question about where the nitrate's coming from is where we have that point. We can build that into something higher on the list, because the primary use of this deck is for me to take the pieces of it that are right for the web page and put it on the web page, but pieces that I need to give to all of my teammates who are answering calls to have so they can have it at the desk phone with them as well. It's very much sort of an internal document and a way for us to have a discussion tonight, not designed to be something right now that is going to be public facing. We expect some questions. CIWW is already getting questions about why didn't they go straight to level 3, and also about why don't we have sufficient treatment capacity at this time, and what the plan is to build that additional capacity in the future. This fundamental question about, do I know if I get my water from Central Iowa Waterworks? Not all metro communities are part of CIWW and may not be taking these same steps. But if you get water in Clyde, you get it from Central Iowa Waterworks, and everybody is touched by this. So that's the clarity we want to give everybody on that point.
One thing I did want to note too is the capacity expansion that's currently under construction or the work done is expanding the sales of treatment plant, which is to reverse osmosis facility. So
there is, definitely a focus and understanding that as production is added, how does RO factor into that? It's highly, high on the list. There's a reverse osmosis does take nitrates out when you have a cyclochemical facility. So, and there's the potential down the road for even further expansion of that particular plant, but also with Central Iowa Water Works, which is reviewing a new plant out west and expansion of the Grimes facility is how do you reverse osmosis factor into that? This challenge is not going away anytime soon.
Metrics, we're building out a dashboard so we can report back. We're gonna have request information from Des Moines Water Works daily on how our pull has been, what they pumped into Clive. And then we want to be able to use changes in metrics to do a good storytelling. That if we're making progress as a community, we want people to know it, keep their energy high and keep their commitment to the work high. If we're not making it, then we want people to know that too. And call on them to hold each other accountable and talk to their neighbors if they see them doing something in the neighborhood. So that's a lot. All of this can change. All of this will need to be revisited over the coming days as we start to implement. And at any point, if you see us doing a practice where you have questions or you feel like we need to reconsider that, I want to hear that immediately so that we can keep this action plan consistent with the direction of the council.
I just wonder about the groups that are, like your Merle, your Earl May, your Home Depot, all those places that sell sod. Would it be advantageous to give them a heads up about this so they're not having the sod farm make huge deliveries?
I think it's a good point. Like they only, don't know if Nerds does that or not, but that would be the only one in our community that I would think could maybe do that. That's a good point in terms of side deliveries because June is a popular month. Get sod down. It's a good time.
It's like the compost down, instead.
Right. Seed compost, right? But this is unprecedented times. We will touch base with you all tomorrow as we continue to work on this in the morning and get a sense of where the reads are at and usage. We'll be checking it every day. Be likely we'll have staff working over the weekend, depending on if we have tags to do. But I will take I want to just check in with the council right now. Is there, because of with it happening over the weekend, I got a sense that you may be not comfortable with seeing shutoffs on the weekend, that we might want to assess where we're at and wait till the beginning of the week. In terms of that comfort, I just got a sense when we were talking about that specific topic, and that's the main thing I wanted to test with you all, because again, we haven't done this before. And we want to make sure we're meeting your needs and we'll message that appropriately. We've got other means, obviously, with our messaging to hopefully push to compliance quickly. But again, we have the enforcement as a backstop.
Can you explain again on the notification? Has that already gone out?
So it depends. You can interpret the notice, for example, that both went out publicly and then we have been sending directly to customers as a notice. You could interpret that as a notice. We're taking the standard right now that once we identify a list tomorrow who's still irrigating, that being another level of notice, and if they continue to irrigate, then we'll tag them. Now we've done the ultimate notice.
I just wondered, where did I get my notice, because I can't find it. So I'm guessing.
Okay, and that's
I just want to understand
too.
it so I can tell people.
Well, and what I would say is if that's one of the challenges we have, right? Not everybody's on express bill pay where we can email them directly like this. If we did, depends on how you pay yours. You get an electronic bill. If you get an electronic bill, you should have received this email.
I pay it automatically. I can't find anything.
Do you get a paper newsletter sent to your house? Okay, so then you're not.
So you're not in the express bill pay system. So that's one of the challenges we have, right? Is we have the ability for those folks that are in the electronic billing system to receive these messages, but of those that are receiving paper, we do not. And so we're relying on our other communication mediums for that message to get out.
That's different though than auto pay, right? Express pay is different than
You can do
auto
both,
pay.
yeah. Like I'm
You
on
could be
this.
an auto pay, but not on express pay, and so you don't get this notice.
Not that way,
That's
not that way, but
Yeah.
But this is one of multiple ways that we are communicating that this is in effect. And,
And that's why we're looking at also doing, when we see the list, it's also doing a phone reach out as well as an email communication. If we see that we have some on the list that might not getting the email communication, and we want to make sure we're providing that appropriate notice. Number one, to educate them, and hopefully 99% of folks are like, oh yeah, I understand it now. Maybe they don't pay attention to the news or anything and didn't see the information. And so we want to educate and get compliance now. That's our number one goal. And we might have some that we'll say that and we'll still want to water their grass. And then it's a question of, okay, what do we do next with those folks? Hopefully it doesn't happen. But that's those layers of notifications. This isn't the only one. We've got other layers to do. The tagging would be the one where it would then trigger, okay, if you haven't seen, now we've tagged your door, you don't see behavior correction. Now we've given every notice that we can try to give. Now it's a question of, okay, now we'll just openly violate the order. Can we shut your water off?
because I would argue that we, or even today, with the steps that we've taken, or with all of our partners, we have met the reasonableness threshold for notification. This has been at the front of every earned media story. This has been at the top of the to-do list for every member community. We have saturated all the communications platforms and continue to do so for the coming days.
If they are in town.
I've been in Council Bluffs all week, so I have seen nothing.
Well, except that, and I don't mean to be argumentative about this, but the urgency of the moment should not be lost. And the ways that we're talking about communicating with people, when you have over 95% of our residents who walk around with one of these in their pockets, this is how we're getting it to them. They're walking around with that in their pockets, whether they're in Clive or whether they're in Council Bluffs.
I would tell you, I'm not trying to make a huge deal out of it. I've been at a conference all week. I have seen nothing, and I'm a council. So
well, but
I just think there's the potential for that to happen.
And that's where these additional layers of notices is intended to hopefully fill that gap. And that's what we're intending to do. And we've got good technology to support that in terms of focusing it in. And we can see who's using irrigation meters. We're going to focus our energies there.
And
This broad messaging.
And I'm not disappointed you don't follow my Twitter or my Facebook.
I'm so sorry.
Just kidding. I mean, it's a good point, right? I think if without the next step of tagging or because email, you don't have everyone's email. Phones, you don't get a hold of them, you know we didn't get a hold of them. So going to a shut off is a bit extreme. But the next step of going to their door, now they have no excuse.
Yes, now we've done pretty much everything we can do
Right.
at that point.
If they're home, if they're on vacation.
If they're home, yeah, no, that's, so maybe we just do shut offs this weekend of people that are home. I mean, we're talking Sunday, right?
But
48 hours, that's
It
Friday
would
is
be
really
Sunday.
it, Saturday is it, Sunday if they abuse it
But
again.
our staff has to come in overtime.
And you have
on the
overtime.
weekend. I'd wait till Monday.
I agree to Monday too.
I think Monday's fine.
I agree with that, because I was gonna ask, I'm a little surprised this doesn't have a financial penalty rather than turning off their water. Their irrigation water or just their water? Like their entire house water?
Everything.
So if we cannot get into the house, it would be at the stop box, it'd be the whole house's water.
And that would stop by for construction.
And then, we didn't mention this, because we should give council direction on this too. When we turn on and off, there is a fee as part of our fee schedule.
Okay.
And it's also, we have the option of municipal infraction for people who continue to disobey the order. And so there is a financial component. Sometimes the way we use the financial hammer in those situations is we won't turn it on until you give us payment right now, sort of electronically over the phone, but we could also then assess those fees on their next utility bills. We can share with you a communication the city of Ankeny has put together that is very, very fee focused. So that's an option that some communities are taking to get further compliance.
Basic fine for tire violations, municipal infraction, and $1,000 fine. Our code doesn't provide that, so.
Well, I think that justifies if we're gonna continue down this route and it's gonna happen more and more, I think that the financial fund has to be there for multiple reasons. If for nothing else,
We need to
to
reevaluate.
pay for overtime of folks on Sunday to, you know, to enforce this, because if this is gonna continue, you know, year after year and this year, week after week, we can't say, but skip Saturday and Sunday, 'cause we don't wanna pay over. Right?
Especially if you're on the, right, so what I'm hearing is we'll best definitely peel back on any shut offs over the weekend, but notices. We will move forward with notices over the weekend, which will require a little bit of time for somebody to go out and tag doors. But that would be minimal compared to the shut offs.
I'm so surprised that meters today can't shut off electronic.
So that's an interesting. That's an interesting point. Yes, okay,
Yes.
so there is systems
Oh,
out
but
there.
not meters we have.
Oh, yeah, there are systems out there.
Yeah,
There
yeah.
are systems out there. And this is something that we've thought about at a staff level, just for water conservation plans down the line of going to all smart meters across the entire city. In that versus infrastructure investment or more storage. In those scenarios, for example, if you're in this type of situation and you want to throttle back irrigation usage at an aggregate level, smart meters present the opportunity to do those kinds of things. They're not perfect, they're not going to work every time, but it would basically an involuntary type restriction could be implemented
Every other day.
for technology. Yeah, you limit it to where it only can run certain times for certain times of the day. That technology is out there. It is an investment to put those kinds of smart meters in across the city. What is that investment worth? You know,
I'm
other
very on
long-term
that Big
infrastructure.
Brother approach on
Yep,
that.
it's definitely
You know,
gonna
that's,
feel that
that's
way.
definitely a tool in the toolbox. Let's see what comes out of
Right.
our communications plan.
Yeah, but this is a down one conversation.
Right.
I will
I see
actually
people
correct
that
one
comply.
comment.
I think-
We do have fine capabilities under our code for the unauthorized use of water. So that's the direction of council. I think I can find you a way to yes that approach.
That is cited by Ankeny in their tag if we got a copy of it.
Let's see what our compliance is first before we start jumping down that road. It's nice to have that in a quiver of arrows right there, but.
Yeah.
You
And
hate
I'll
to
be in
lead with
contact
that.
with
We're
you.
not Ankeny. I understand where they're coming from.
Well, I mean, what you're being proposed, you know, is a disconnect on Monday. And I think that's an extraordinary remedy. And I might suggest that before you do that, they may actually be entitled to a public hearing. So I just put that out there. That you may want to consider something short of the disconnect, by a penalty.
Would Beaver be on that public hearing committee?
I think you should select that by ballot.
The reason that again was there is that is specifically from the 28E agreement language.
And I respect their language and the compliance requirement. It indicates that member agencies must, within 48 hours, service will be terminated. It doesn't, I'm more than happy to discuss what your remedies are if for some reason you don't comply with this or what their remedies are, but to the extent the council is looking to disconnect people's service altogether, I will just caution that I think that's an extreme remedy that we want to be very clear about before we authorize that.
Well, that's why we have a lot of steps before we get there. That's not a first term action. There's all kinds of tagging and reaching out. So I think we're not going to find very many of those. I'm interested to see how you have to get there first.
But I am open to reacting to that after we see the data. I do think the residents of Clyde will react, you know, and see. and, do what's right. I do think we're gonna have the majority. Then let's circle back and look at it, because I would prefer a fine over turning off somebody's bathing and drinking water. I mean, if we could turn their irrigation system off, fine, but now we're talking drinking water, cooking water, the whole works. I'd rather hit them with a fine than to hit them with their basic necessity of life.
Yeah. We discussed that, yeah. And
Turned off.
And we could interpret the requirement in 28E to be a little more gray and say that what that really means is we didn't want them to stop being able to use water for essential purposes. This is all about protecting essential purposes of water. And so the shut off is specifically about the irrigation. The reason I think the language was written that way is that not every community does their irrigation with a separate irrigation.
And to get in to shut off just the irrigation meter, you have to get into the home, and it's not like a stop box or something where, again, you can shut off the irrigation meter. It's just turning a knob that could be turned right back on as soon as it's. So with the current setups that we have, but I think we've got council direction where you all are at. We will operate that way this weekend. We'll be in regular contact with you, as I have been for the last few days on these changes that have been coming at us fairly quickly.
I would think Monday, it might be appropriate to let us know where you are, particularly before you.
We'll probably be letting you know over the weekend.
Okay.
So we're gonna be looking at the daily reports, and then, so I will be keeping you informed over the weekend.
Sorry, Susan, go ahead.
I'm sorry. So we talked about trust in Central Iowa Water Works, and I think that is very important. It's unfortunate that this is happening right after that got established, but it's part of why I'm asking some of these questions, because I think it's pretty easy to think, is it really that much more of a drought right now that we've seen in other springs? It doesn't seem like it to me. Maybe it is. What is the emergency that happened besides just having the high application in agricultural areas or something?
It's just kind of a perfect storm. Our sources have too high level of nitrates. I mean, that's just what it is. Those rivers, we can't even pull from one of the two rivers.
We're definitely not in drought in Central Iowa.
Yeah, it's not.
So that's what's just hard to fathom.
It's the dang nitrates. I mean,
that's been part of the challenge, I think, here with just getting folks to adjust, especially on their irrigation, while we haven't seen much change even with the voluntary requests. They don't see that we're in drought.
Well,
and it's another reason that it's happening, and that's harder to fathom, right?
We got plenty of water.
That's why we're trying to educate.
It's just full of nitrates.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, the Fluor facility could be running at a much higher production level. There's plenty of water in the raccoon and the Des Moines. The restriction is there's only so much that they can send through the nitrate removal facility fast. Well, we have our direction. Thank you very much for that lengthy discussion.
Yeah,
that was necessary that we needed to do.
One more lengthy, yeah, we're in reports. I have one more a question though on that. Where are we with the you like this? Where are we with the monitoring just your regular views? We used to do that, right? And then we got away with it. I know that was a long discussion. How do we get back to that to say, hey, your water at your house is excessive at this point.
We're doing it.
People can sign up.
We're doing it actively as we talked about at the staff level. We're doing daily reports on reaching out, and then reaching out if we see a high consumption alert.
Because this is an important time to do that, especially because if you've got a leaky toilet or a bad fixture in your house, that's more.
But we're just doing it now?
So we've been doing that. Yeah, when we talked about it last, we took it over and rewrote the script. And not every meter is to be able to. I'm not just representing, like we're actively doing that every day. And our staff is reviewing a high consumption report, and if they see something out of the norm, we're reaching out to you.
And we just don't have a list that you can check, you can sign up for.
Yeah.
We're just doing that actively.
We're doing it for
every house.
Yes.
every meter in our
Yep.
system.
So you're cut.
Report every day.
Yeah, we have a tolerance. We have. Yeah, we wrote scripts on it. So talk about that.
Matt, do you have anything else?
I have had plenty.
Yes, you have.
Matthew, do you have anything?
Oh, I do have one more thing.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Many of you may have noticed or picked up on the news report of the bomb threat at the hospital. Your city prosecutor is handling that very seriously. So just as a report.
Appreciate that update. Let's see, Matthew, you have nothing? Pete, anything further? Do we have anything else for the good of the order? Otherwise, we will adjourn at 8:44.